Welcome, everyone. Can you hear me? Is the mic on? Okay, great. My name is Susan Scorbati, and I'm the director of the Center for the Advancement of Public Action at Bennington College. That's the building we're all in today. Thank you all so much for coming. I want to thank first the Governor Scott for coming down to Bennington and initiating such important dialogue and action for our state and starting in Bennington. And thank you just for the wonderful work you've done on behalf of Vermont. I want to thank our legislators that are here today. I'm not going to name everyone because we would be here for a long time. I'd like to thank all of our state leaders. We have many people, commissioners and secretaries who are here today. Thank you so much for coming down to Bennington. And thank you for our local leaders, our town leaders. And we have many, many of our town leaders here today, and it's wonderful to see everybody come out. They're doing great work for the town of Bennington and for the region. And then, not the least, to thank Jim Baker, who really allowed us to organize and make this convening possible. So we really want to thank him for all of his work. I will now turn it over to Provost Maurice Hall, who's our provost at Bennington College, and I'm pleased to, he will be introducing President Laura Walker of Bennington College, who will welcome us. She's in Washington, D.C., and hopefully we'll have her on Zoom. Thank you, Maurice.
Good morning.
Good morning.
That's a hearty good morning. And welcome to Bennington College. Good to see you all here. Good to see you in here. This is the right place for you to be. A college that welcomes excitement, innovation, and bringing together a wide variety of voices. Such a pleasure to have you here, Maurice Hall, as Susan said. Welcome, Governor Scott. It is good to have you here on the campus of Bennington College. It is my pleasure this morning to introduce our president. Laura R. Walker is the 11th president of Bennington College. Before joining Bennington, she was the founding president and CEO of New York Public Radio, WNYC. And during 23 years of transformation under her growth and under her leadership, WNYC was awarded 10 George Foster Peabody Awards for its productions, including Radio Lab, On the Media, and Radio Rookies. She served as the Vice President of Development at Sesame Workshop and was a producer at NPR and at Carnegie Hall. Laura sits on the boards of the Commonwealth Fund, the Eagle Picture Trust, and the President's Advisory Council of Wesleyan University, and was twice named as one of New York City's 50 most powerful women. She has received an Edward R. Murrow Award and has been honored by the Municipal Arts Society, the Bedford-Stuyvesant Restoration Corporation, and Kid Spirit, among others. Laura holds an MBA from the Yale School of Management and a bachelor's degree in history from Wesleyan University. She has come to Bennington College with energy, verve, and enthusiasm, and has already been a transformative force here on campus. It is my distinct honor and pleasure to welcome by Zoom, where she is doing another act of transformation in Washington, D.C., President Laura Walker. Welcome.
Thank you so much. Can you all see me and hear me? I am so sorry that I can't be with you today, but as you can see from my background, I am actually with you in spirit here at Kappa in this beautiful building, and I'm proud to welcome you all to Bennington. Thank you, Susan, for hosting us and facilitating the discussion today. Most of you, I'm sure, know Susan Scorbati, but for those of you who don't, you will see today that she has a gift for bringing people together and making change. Her work has touched people locally, nationally, and worldwide. We are truly grateful to have her at the helm of the Center for the Advancement of Public Action and among our talented faculty. As a group today, we're in fantastic hands. With Susan and Maurice and on behalf of the whole college, Welcome, and thanks each of you for being here. I am particularly delighted to welcome Governor Phil Scott. Governor Scott has led Vermont with great dedication, strong values, vision, and courage. He's a true partner and leader for creating a strong Vermont. Thank you, Governor. We are also, as Susan said, happy to host the heads of agencies, our local legislators, and town leaders. Vermont has so much to be proud of. It has breathtaking natural beauty, a rich historical heritage, and a hardworking rural culture. Vermont has fantastic outdoor recreation opportunities. We finally got to ski and snowboard down, snowshoe down here in southern Vermont with the snow last week. And I think Vermont has the best food and beverages anywhere. And on top of that, it is bursting with vibrant and creative energy. And Bennington County, as a microcosm of this beautiful state, checks all of these boxes. We are fortunate, too, to have strong leaders who care deeply for the people of this town and this state, and who are tireless in their commitment to tackle our biggest challenges. This was evident especially through the COVID pandemic, and it is evident today as we gather to address critical public health and public safety needs. Governor Scott's remarkable leadership during COVID helped us all get through that dark time. I'd like to give the governor and his team a round of applause for their extraordinary. Bennington College is the perfect place for this important summit. We have a long history of putting knowledge to work in the world. We call it public action, and it is the purpose of the space you are sitting in. With creativity at its core, Bennington encourages people to think of old problems in new ways, and that is what we're going to do today. And Bennington College and the people of Bennington are particularly fantastic partners. I don't know whether you know the latest example of our work together, and one that really demonstrates Susan's incredible leadership. It started with a convening much like this one. It sought to reduce hunger and improve nutrition for the people in Bennington. 2 weeks ago, the outcome of that work, the Bennington Community Market opened its doors. It's the product of the work and collaboration of scores of community partners. An area once determined to be a food desert now has fresh local produce and other groceries available affordably to residents 7 days a week. And working with the amazing farmers around this area and a lot of community partners, it is really an amazing thing to see. And if you have any time to go down to look at it, please do. It was a tremendous accomplishment and a great example of what convenings plus years of committed effort can do. So here we are again with tremendous challenges before us. But I believe in this group. Many of you have been working to improve public safety and public health independently within your organizations and in strategic partnerships. You have been helping to combat the opioid crisis, helping the homeless, and helping educate families. You have been doing this for many years. Today, there's an opportunity to really collaborate, to use that well-learned knowledge and experience. You will connect with new and familiar faces and identify new collaborative opportunities. You will leverage other communities' successes. You will become energized by the creativity and commitment of those around you, and you will break new ground. I have another set of predictions. After years of hard work, you will have made amazing progress toward improved public health and public safety in Bennington. You will have changed countless lives for the better. You will have realigned the trajectory of this beautiful town. You will have inspired others near and far in their work to improve their communities. Our mission at Bennington College is to make the world more beautiful, more sustainable, democratic, and just. We are honored to be with you in this work. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Laura. And now Chief Doucette will speak to us on behalf of the town of Bennington.
Good morning. On behalf of the town of Bennington and Stuart Hurd, I welcome you to Bennington College. It's beautiful here. As I was standing around this morning talking with many of you, everyone's just amazed at how beautiful the campus is here. And I'm sure that at some point today you can take a walk around and check things out. There's a lot of positive things that happen here at Bennington College. It's amazing, and you should really check that out. As I look around the room after 33 years of law enforcement, I've worked with many of you over the years and watched many of you grow, as I have, just not vertically. When I tell you that I'm here to represent the town and Stuart Hurd, I'm sincere in telling you that Mr. Hurd is 100% behind this project and everything that's been going on. We started this project looking at resources and what was needed, and we've come around, thanks to Mr. Baker, and looked at many things, and we today collectively will work together to continue to build on the relationships that we already have with many of you. As we sit here today, Bennington has so much to offer. The state of Vermont has so many things to offer. And we have to remain positive and think positively about our future. Yes, we have issues. They need to be addressed, and we all understand that. But at the same time, we need to make sure that we're doing the best we can, focusing on many of the positive things that we have in place already. So today, we will continue to build on the relationships that we have already formed, many of us in this room, and will continue to grow. We are very pleased when Commissioner Morrison called me and said, "Would you like to be first?" I know that there are things that happen when people go first, right? We stumble, we make mistakes, and then she said, "Well, what if I could get Jim Baker to help you out?" I said, "That might work." And with that being said, she assured me that the governor would be here, and he is. I'm very happy about that. Colonel Birmingham is here. There's so many impressive people in this room that, today is going to be amazing. We're going to work hard. We're going to come up with some ideas. We're going to drive forward, and we're going to make things happen in this community. And then other people are going to follow Bennington. That's what's going to happen here. Follow Bennington. We're number one. We're number one for a reason. And I know that there's many other communities in Vermont that are struggling, but we will pave the way and show them how to do it today. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Jennifer Morrison, and I have the distinct privilege of being the Commissioner of Public Safety. The Chief is correct when the governor gave me the charge to try to work across state government as part of the 10-point plan to reduce violence in our communities. He meant it. He meant work across state government. So on behalf of my colleagues from the Agency of Human Services, many of them are in the room here today, the Department of Public Safety, the Agency of Digital Services, and other pieces of state government, we spent a few months, maybe a couple more than the last one, but we spent a few months organizing ourselves, learning how to share data streams that were not traditionally shared across government, and we then turned to the landscape to say which community do we do a deep engagement with first, and it all boiled down to relationships, and that I cannot say enough about that in this room today. If we do nothing else today, which I know we will, we need to leave here with stronger, more comfortable relationships and know who to call. Even if they're not the right person, they'll know who in state government to connect you to, or locally. Even if you don't get the right person, they'll know who in the local scene to connect a state actor to. So I would strongly encourage you to reach out and make relationships today on the breaks. Stick your hand out and stop someone in the hallway and figure out how they fit into this. Because relationships are how we are going to get things done. That is always the way it works in Vermont. So with that, I can think of no place better to be than a place who has the name action in it, right? That's what we're here to do, is take action. We've been talking, we've been planning, now it's time to take action. And the guy that kicked it all off, and the man who is going to frame it up even better for us right now, is my boss, and I could not be prouder to serve for Governor Phil Scott. So thank you for being here.
Well, good morning, everyone. And it really is great to see all of you here. You've exceeded my expectations. I thought this was going to be a much smaller group, but for all of us to be together here in one room at this point in time is remarkable, and it will give us good results, I believe, at the end of the day. So I want to thank you all for your commitment to this community and the leadership you're providing to this state. Looking across Vermont, we're truly seeing some exciting transformational things happening. In county economic centers like Bennington, you're well prepared for this once-in-a-lifetime opportunity that's been handed to us and is within our reach. What we must avoid is repeating the mistakes of the past, because what typically happens in Montpelier is a new shiny object comes along and we don't follow through on whatever last session, what their priority was in the last session. And this isn't a criticism of the legislature, it's just the way it evolves. Every 2 years, new people are elected, and everyone's enthusiastic about whatever they bring to the table. But the hard work is really about finishing what you start. So we have to focus on the fundamentals, and this is a great start. And then we have to finish what we do begin with. So with all this federal money and one-time state surplus, we're able to make historic investments in areas that have challenged us for years, like housing, climate change mitigation, water, sewer, stormwater infrastructure, broadband, community revitalization, and much, much more. These are the basics that will rebuild the foundation we need to re-energize county centers and the smaller communities that surround them. A renewed focus on the fundamentals will create safer, healthier, and more economically secure communities. These essential ingredients provide the stability and revenue growth that allow for work like this. Joining the operations of our public safety and human services systems at the local level so we can really get upstream to solve and prevent the most complex community problems. But let me be more specific. Over the years, it's become clear the decisions made in the State House are felt very differently across the state, because all our communities have different assets and attributes, and different challenges and needs. That's why one size rarely fits all. This session, I've asked the legislature to pay much more attention to the individual needs of our communities, so we can close the gap between regions and lift up all our towns and villages, not just the ones that have historically done better. I truly believe if the legislature supports my investment proposals, we can give every community the chance to catch up, to act on a vision for their future and help them see it through. This is how we'll attract more people and new jobs, put more kids in schools, renovate downtowns, help them reclaim their character, and renew their identity. This is all achievable because of the one-time funding we have available. So what does this all have to do with this summit? Well, while the legislature and I work out our differences on money to make these infrastructure investments in communities across all 14 counties, we also need to do the hard work of transforming the relationship between state and local partners on the ground every day in our public safety and human services systems. We also need to measure what we're doing, because that's important, in real time, so we know whether the work is meeting our goals and preventing more problems in the future, because that's what it's all about. Whether we're federal, state, local, national, public, or private, it's about solving problems and helping people, right? That's what we're here to do, all of us, in every single sector that we represent. So I asked my team to find a community that recognizes the challenges, is making smart economic investments, is open to doing things in a little different way, and is motivated, and they immediately recommended you, Bennington. And as a result, and as I understand it, the collaboration is resulting in exactly what we were hoping for. Together, we're building a strong foundation using a community task force type team that communicates in real time and is flexible enough to get upstream in order to take care of issues before they fester and become bigger problems. In short, from my perspective, you're the leading edge, developing the next evolution of community leadership. But let's be honest, much of what we're doing has been gleaned from other efforts across the state over the years, like Project Vision in Rutland, a remarkable program. When I was Lieutenant Governor, I had the good fortune of sitting in on a couple of those meetings, and I was so impressed with what they were doing. And this is kind of evolved from that. And we need to apply all the lessons we've learned, because there's been other concepts throughout Vermont that are trying to accomplish the same thing, to get even better results in the end. All the while, recognizing that being transparent about results, being willing to rethink the way we do things, and always striving to improve is how we'll sustain the enthusiasm to do the work. Now, this work takes a lot of energy. I don't have to remind you of all that, because you're the ones with boots on the ground. But in my experience, in almost everything I do, building anything worthwhile takes commitment and sweat equity. To the state employees in the room, especially the local team, it's important for you to know you have my full support and want to know what I can do to help make this successful, or even more successful than I think it's going to be. One of the greatest lessons we learned in our response to the pandemic was that breaking down the silos works. We found cross-agency support is so important, because at the end of the day, we're all part of the same team. And if we pull in the same direction, we get better results. That experience also reminds us of the value of good communication, collecting information quickly, sharing it clearly, so that we can make those decisions that we needed to make and act quickly to get the results we needed, and make adjustments as necessary. Here's the point. When we know what we want to achieve, measure where things stand frequently. Remember that one size rarely fits all, and use a coordinated team approach. We can accomplish great things. So I want to thank you again for all your work. I'm looking forward to seeing great outcomes and to sharing your success with other communities, as this is transformational. As I said, this revitalization can spread across Vermont, and you're the nucleus to start that. So thank you again for all you've done.
Thank you, Governor Scott. Thank you so much. Okay, now Colonel Jim Baker will be speaking with us. Jim is the former commissioner of the Department of Corrections and currently a consultant for public safety to help the governor on this initiative. Jim.
So good morning. Again, Governor, thank you for those words. Look, it is sometimes a daunting task. As I went around since January, December, February, meeting with many of you and talking about what the challenges on the ground are, it can seem daunting at times. And how many people are following NCAA, right? If you don't believe in miracles, I hope you watched the game the other night with Fairleigh Dickerson and Pete Perdue in the game. The impossible can happen. And it takes hard work, as the governor said, is sweat equity. I mean, as I watched that game, it was like the tallest players, like 6'4", they're up against a 7'5" guy, right? And they outplayed him from the beginning to the end. So the focus and hard work becomes really important. I do want to take us through Megan, can you put that slide up? I do want to remind us of how we got here today, because I think it's important. And I just want to make a couple of quick points in a PowerPoint slide. As the governor said, many of the lessons from the pandemic has been part of the conversation that I've had with Commissioner Morrison and others about how can we approach building capacity. And this started out by doing a heat map. Where's Josiah? Over here. Josiah. So anybody that wants to be scared about artificial intelligence, stay away from it. Do not give that guy your cell number. Do not join him on TikTok. Stay away from it. This is one of the heat maps that Josiah's been working on, that weekly we take a look at a Wednesday meeting with the leadership at the state level. I only put this up because it goes back to what Chief Doucette said. You know, I've lived in this county since 1978. Many times I've worked all over the place, but I never left the county because I love it here. There's some great stuff going on. There's great stuff going on in Bennington. You know, as I took the team around last night, we went by the Putnam Project and the community market and the efforts that are being made in the town and downtown. It's an amazing amount of work going on. And so when I hook up with people I know that have been in the area for a long time, they start whining and complaining about Bennington. When you take a look at the heat map, it gives you a picture of where the calls for service for the police department are going. So this data right now is just police department data. We're starting to blend other data into that. But it gives you a picture that where the problems are located are condensed. And we'll talk about that as the day goes on. And one of the blocks on your agenda is I'll walk through some of the folks that are doing the good work in the community so this doesn't turn into a negative, because you're going to hear about the problem statements in a little bit, right? So how did we get here? We got here by taking a look at what's going on in the community, and as the governor said, the capacity to build. I'm shocked that this number of people on a Monday morning at 8:30 have come here because they recognize what needs to be done in the community to make it even better and lower the harm in the community. There are challenges here. I want to go through a quick slide deck. We're going to talk a little bit at the end of the day about the book you got about bleeding out. It's kind of, I think most of the folks that I've been around since January are probably sick of me hearing about Tom App and bleeding out. They're probably sick of me giving this speech. It's about location, behavior, and people. So when you talk about lowering the harm in the community, you got to know where the location is, what the behavior is, and then determine what the response to that behavior is. And most of the time, it's not a law enforcement response. But unfortunately, in a lot of communities, they put that pressure on the police department. And that's part of what we're trying to do today, is to spread the responsibility across the board for the behavior that happens at a given location. So I'm also a big fan of General McChrystal, Team of Teams. Anyone read that book? Right. And it's another read. And Megan, you can go to the slide. As we go through today, I want you to be thinking about, the first thing is trust. One of the things McChrystal talked about when he was in Afghanistan as the commander of the forces is that starting to combine the multiple teams together. And again, this is not a military thing. General McChrystal is very, very active in business and other organizations doing this type of training. And I just want to say, as I went around, and I'm not calling anybody out here, and this is not unusual. As I met with many people, and I sat in on focus groups, it wasn't unusual for someone to make a comment about a service that was directed at another agency. I heard it several times. It's not unusual. I heard it when I was in Rutland as the chief at Project Vision. We have to build trust. And as the day goes on, we need to learn and trust each other to be able to build capacity to do the work that needs to be done on the ground. Can you take the next slide? McChrystal talks about a common purpose. So as we talk today, what's our common purpose? What are we trying to accomplish? We want to lower the harm to the community, but we need to agree on what that looks like. Many organizations have their mission and their goals, and that's important. But we've got to have a shared common purpose of what we're trying to do. The next slide. shared consciousness. You know, what McChrystal talks about is, does everybody have the information they need? This goes back to what the governor talked about. Why did the pandemic work so well? It's because that data was every single day. We saw the governor at a press conference. Josiah was in the back room cooking the numbers. No, I'm just kidding. Josiah was driving data to make decisions. I was the commissioner of corrections at the time, and I remember the governor saying, test to suppress, test to suppress. And when we had an outbreak, we contact traced. And really the work that is in front of us is really no different than contact tracing. You got someone that's addicted to opiates, that means other people around them are addicted to opiates. And you tell me the difference between being positive for COVID and being addicted to opiates. It's a public health issue. And it's no difference when you contact trace. So the shared consciousness of sharing information. And then the final highlight of McChrystal's work is empowered execution. And the governor and I did not coordinate our comments. But when he talked about the work on the ground, and him and I were speaking off to the side about, I've been a state governor 40 years, so I understand it pretty well. In and out of state governor for 40 years. And where we really fail a lot of times are great ideas, but we don't execute. We have to execute to be able to be successful. And we have to measure what we're doing, and that's the challenges in front of us. And I'll quickly go through this last beat. I just think this is McChrystal uses this analogy in his book of a gardener, right? And so, break up hard soil. That's what we've been doing for the last several months. We've been meeting and talking and starting to break it up and evaluating operations and figuring out who's got the assets. Plant the seeds in the right place. That's what we're doing today. We're going to plant seeds today to be able to work together moving forward. Ensure that essential nutrients are available. And I'm going to kind of ad-lib a little bit because I'm not sure if General McChrystal thinks this way. But those nutrients are about being really honest with each other about where we are. You know, I have a saying that when folks are around me, I say all the time, when I see organizations that are struggling, in denial, stick to their story, and no one's got enough courage to call them out. And then you get the same results, right? Denial, stick to your story, and then no one's got the courage to call them out. That goes back to the trust. That's part of the essential nutrients. Remove the barriers that block the light, right? Things can't grow. Bureaucracy, you know, I was just talking to some folks this morning. I've been in several branches of state government. The bureaucracy gets in our way. We have to blow it up. You know, not to get anybody in trouble here, but there's a few state employees here. I like to praise them because they color outside the lines. And sometimes you have to color outside the lines to get stuff done. Set up a regular cadence to weed and seed. And that cadence is, you'll hear about this at the end of the day, is what's the cadence on this work? When are we going to meet again and what's the next steps moving forward? And then give the time to let the plants grow. And this takes time to do what we're setting out to do here in Bennington. So I want you to be thinking about that as the day goes on, about those points from General McChrystal. And I am thrilled again that this turnout happened. I appreciate everyone who picked up the phone and answered the phone when I called or answered my email. Even the folks that didn't know who I was, it was like, who the hell is this guy? So I thank you, and I am very optimistic, as the chief talked about, that there's action that's going to come out of this, and Bennington's going to set the pace. So with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Sue.
So now we're going to hear from a panel, this part of our program, on the current challenges on the ground. So I'm going to ask the people to please come and sit up here. And you can come and use the microphone here or take the microphone off of here and sit here. So please, Lorna Mattern, Executive Director of United Counseling Service, Kyle Hoover, District Director of Department of Children and Families, Lieutenant Cam Grandy, Bennington Police, District Director of Department of Health, Megan Harrington, and Vermont Blueprint for Health Manager, Todd Sapasfold.
So I guess I'm first. As Susan said, I'm Lorna Matern. I'm the Executive Director of the United Counseling Service. I'm also here as Acting Youth and Family Services Director of UCS for the last 7 months, which I think gives me a little bit of a unique perspective of the overarching UCS community problems as well as in the community, on the ground challenges that we're facing as well. Prior to becoming the executive director, I was the actual children's director for many years, and I have to say, between that time, 7 years ago or so, and now, what I'm seeing is a significant increase in problems and acuity that are being presented to our children's services folks for what children and families are facing. For example, we have many families that we work with that when we provide services, only two providers are required to go into that home at a time. It's not for a crisis, it's just for regular ongoing wraparound services. They are restricted from going into the house alone. We also work with several children whose parents have died violently through overdose deaths and suicides. And so I really just wanted to give you a snapshot of the last 60 days. This is only my view for the last 60 days and my snapshot. I'm sure there are other things that other people are much more aware of than me, but I wanted to let you hear about the last 60 days. Our community experienced 4 very traumatic, very public suicides. There was one very significant and traumatic attempt. UCS sees on average about 2 to 3 people a week who are presenting with significant suicidal ideation. There was 2 overdose deaths. Several Bennington police officers responded to 2 suicides in 1 week. Our staff provide hours of debriefing with the police department and with the rescue squad and school staff as part of our relationship that was being talked about already this morning. We continue to see a significant increase in demand for our service. In the last 60 days, there were 254 calls for service. There's 1,108 emergency services interventions. There were 171 mental health assessments at the emergency department in the last 60 days. And there were 54 mobile crisis assessments that were provided, and therefore 24% of our crisis interventions were mobile in the community and not in the emergency department. 181 people are on our wait list for service. Family Emergency Services, or FES, which is a crisis intervention program for any child-related crisis. And it's only available for mobile crisis Monday through Friday. Our emergency services team takes the rest of the time. They received 130 mobile crisis calls. That's in 60 days. Now remember, that's Monday through Friday during business hours. 130 crisis calls. That's an average of 3 calls a day. And as Kate Abbott can tell you, that's primarily going to the schools. As a point of reference, pre-pandemic, Family Emergency Services received about 10 to 15 calls a month. We receive about 65 a month now. And our Psychiatric Urgent Care for Kids, or PUC program, which some of you might know, kept 23 kids in a mental health crisis out of the emergency department. That doesn't mean other kids weren't at the emergency department and trained us, and you can talk about that for sure. But there were 23 kids that were on the way to the emergency department because they had a mental health crisis so significant that they needed to leave their environment and go to the emergency room. And thankfully, we ended up diverting them to our program. So that's just a very quick snapshot of what we know at UCS, what we've been involved in, and what we've been dealing with in just 60 days.
Thank you, Lorna. Again, my name is Lieutenant Camille Brandy. I'm going to I've been in law enforcement almost 30 years. In the patrol division, most of my career. In the last 4 years, I've been in the position of lieutenant. The last couple of years, law enforcement has come with many challenges. But in the last couple of years, it's been extremely challenging for the men and women of the Bennington Police Department. Critical staffing levels with officers and dispatchers required to work many overtime shifts, their days off, with increased call volume. Still, the call volume for the Bennington Police Department is on the rise, approximately 13,000 calls in 2022, which is an increase from 2021 with critical staffing levels, puts more stress on our personnel. In 2022, the Bennington Police Department responded to 22 confirmed shootings. Some of these shootings were involved multiple people, multiple firearms, and multiple shots being fired. Those acts of violence are not just impacting the officers that are responding to that, it's also our community. One shooting involved a garage, a gunfire that you would see something out of Hollywood, with a gun battle between two groups of individuals who were not from Bennington, coming from central Massachusetts, shooting into a house that housed an apartment complex that housed a retired Air Force person and a retired woman who was living there alone. We're seeing young adults coming into our state as young as 16 years old, coming to Bennington to traffic fentanyl. These individuals know they're coming here at that age because they know our laws, they understand our laws, they know our laws better than some of us. And when you interact with these individuals and you make an arrest, they know that we have to, we're not going to be able to detain them for a long period of time. They readily admit that they're 17, 18 years old and that we have to charge and release. And that is challenging. As you can see in the slide above, these are some of the things that our officers are coming across when they're dealing with individuals coming into Bennington. We often see these individuals after charges have been, they've been arraigned. We see these individuals released back into our community or their community, and they come back into our community, and they've gone from trafficking fentanyl to a violent act, and it just continues. These shootings, we had 2 homicides in 2022 with critical staffing levels. These are extremely exhausting investigations. They require a lot of investigative hours, and with that, critical staffing levels makes them even more difficult. We work closely with the Bennington County State's Attorney's Office and some of our federal partners, as well as our state partners. But there's still a lot of work that are involved in these cases, and as the head of the patrol division, our people are exhausted, and they are having a really difficult time with these constant shootings. I appreciate what you have said. Bennington PD handles more mental health calls than any other law enforcement agency in Bennington County combined. But yet there's no resources for Bennington PD to embed a mental health clinician within our department. That clinician not having that clinician is challenging for us. Officers are constantly responding to these mental health calls. Lorna touched upon it a little bit. 3 of those suicides I personally was at. And those type of calls take a toll on the community as well as our personnel. Under Chief Doucette's leadership, last year we embedded a human traffic case manager. That case manager has been to all types of training. The training actually, she was onboarded late fall, spent most of December and January in training, and since her training from January, she already has 20 open cases here in Bennington County. 20 open cases of human trafficking in Bennington County. That is a huge challenge for us. We need to continue to work with our stakeholders, collaborators, and identifying more resources so we can get the services to some of these people that we are constantly involved with, and identifying those missed opportunities to get them the services they need. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Kyle Hoover. I'm the District Director with the Vermont Department for Children and Families here in the Bennington District Office. I've been with DCF for 18 years now, 11 of which I was doing front-end work, so those are the investigations and assessments. So I spent a lot of my time in the community, in the field, or on the couch, as I'd like to say, trying to impact change. I've definitely seen a lot of the changes that my colleagues have referenced. I also want to put out there, I've been working with these guys for 18 years too, and many of you in this room too. So like a good social worker, I'll end with some positive stuff around that, but I want to give you an idea of what it feels like right now in our division, in our department specifically. We have an increase in caseload size, and that's been, as of late, it's dropped a little bit, but it is still serious cases we're seeing. Substance abuse, but also a level of violence and a level of threat that's tied to it that's unlike anything I've seen in my career. That includes children who are exposed, children who are actually ingesting some of these substances as well, and that leads to some serious fallout, as you can imagine. There's also parents, as Cam and Laura both mentioned, who are part of threats and part of the trafficking and use themselves, which is causing related concerns for neglect and risks to young children. And we also have our teens who are exposed to all of this. Teens who are parenting themselves, teens who are staying home from school so they can parent their siblings, teens who are essentially the only safety in households, and then teens who themselves are using, teens who are themselves manipulated into the trafficking that we're seeing locally. And then Cam touched on it too, a newer trend within the last couple of years are those youth that are coming from out of state to our community specifically to sell fentanyl, crack cocaine, heroin, knowing our laws, knowing the things like raise the age, which are extremely well intended. We all know about brain development. We all know that a 19-year-old shouldn't have to suffer for a silly mistake that they made. And yet it's being exploited by youth to the point where it's bogging up not just court time, it's bogging up local resources. I know I've testified for days about why these youth are a danger, why these youth shouldn't be allowed to benefit our family court system because they've come here with an intention like we haven't seen from a 16, 17-year-old. And then we have younger kids as well. We have kids who are in our custody with complex needs that we've also really not seen the volume that we have. We have younger kids in places like Community House who are getting assessed for serious mental health issues. We have kids who are placed as far away as the Cape or in New Hampshire. We're looking right now at Denver, Colorado as a place. So we have kids who are leaving our community to get the help that they need and coming back to the same potential dysfunction here. So that's something that I hope we can touch on too, which is the local needs that we have, the needs for proximate treatment, the needs for, as I said in one of our groups, where you grow up and where you live in Vermont should not dictate whether or not you get the services that you deserve or the sobriety that parents also earn. And that brings us to some of the larger systemic care issues. We have complex needs for kids, and we actually have the least amount of beds right now that we've had over the last couple of years for those residential placements. We also, here in Bennington, we're unique in that we have Vermont School for Girls, we have the CIAL Corporation, and so that's bringing a lot of the statewide high-end systemic care kids to our communities, and I know that's also involving UCS, CAM, and our family courts too when those youth act out or blow out of those programs too. And then staff specifically, we've seen turnover and burnout pretty much across the board. I know from my exit interviews, staff are saying it's a great place to work, I love the culture, I love my colleagues, but I can't spend another weekend worrying about literally a child dying on my caseload or a case that I know I couldn't do the preventative work that really brought me here. So they're really in exclusively kind of reaction mode and still committed to the cause, but you can slowly see the car wreck coming, and I think there are staff who are feeling that they don't have the ability to stop that all the time. Which then brings me to, I appreciated the governor's responses around how we need to look at each community in its own entity. There was a study done over the last couple of years by University of Vermont that was presented to the legislation around why Vermont has the 4th highest per capita kids in custody, in state custody. And one of the drivers of that was asking about rural services and preventative services rurally too. And as I'm reading that study, I'm thinking a lot about all of us. I'm thinking about how many times I've advocated for UCS to get more funding, for police departments to get more funding, because one of the things I learned 18 years ago when I first came here is we are a community that does collaborate. I'm in meetings on a weekly basis or a monthly basis with many of the faces here, and so we know how to get together. I think we've always been a place that does more with less. Today, though, my challenge is I think it is time to say we need more. We need preventative services, we need something in addition to the collaboration, in addition to streamlining, because I don't want it to be meetings about meetings, right? We want it to be stuff that's effective, that's on the ground, and that's preventing kids, especially, from experiencing trauma, and then that generational cycle of abuse continues. That's what I want to end with, though. I am really fortunate to, in this community, I think of people. I don't think of bureaucracy. I don't think of organizations. I think of, if it's something with the school, I'm going to call Melissa. Oh, I wonder if Jared's going to subpoena me for court. Is Meg going to be in this meeting? And that's what keeps me here. That's why I won't go anywhere, because I want to fight this fight for this community amongst these people.
Hi, my name is Megan Harrington. I'm the District Director of the Vermont Department of Health, Bennington District Office. Thanks so much for having me here. Our local Office of Health, we really are kind of behind the scenes. That's the beauty of public health. When it's working, you don't know we're there. And so a lot of our time is spent providing technical support to our community partners. We're big in emergency response. Conveners, we tend to be at a lot of meetings and we pick up on things, and so we really try to connect the dots between local organizations. And one of our big pushes the last couple of years has been utilizing data at the local level. So I showed this first slide here because a lot of times in our work in public health, the new buzzword is health equity, and it's floats all over the place. And so I'd like to kind of ground my next couple slides with this, and that when we're talking about health equity, we're not talking about the differences that we might see in health outcomes based on kind of the biological factors of an individual. So if we're looking at conditions associated with advanced age, just by natural laws, people with advanced age are going to be affected more than people who are young. When we're talking about health equity, we're looking at stark differences within a population that are usually based on race, on socioeconomic status, rural versus urban. And it's when we start to see those stark differences that they are not on the onus of the individual, they're actually being supported and maintained by the structures that people are operating within. So I want to start by, just for folks who aren't from the Bennington area, this is our little town. We have 4 census tracts in Bennington. You can see the population size here. And one of the things that when Colonel Jim Baker and I started discussing was of all the stats and all the data we can share, the one that really stands out that we've been looking at in our office is our differences in life expectancy at birth between our 4 census tracts within Bennington. You can see that we have, over 11 years between our northeast corner and our west. And in this moment too, I ask everyone kind of, for folks who are familiar with Bennington, check in with yourself when you see these numbers and you know about that area of town or the downtown area. Where does your brain go? Or is your first thought, structures and systems? Sometimes our first thoughts are on individual behaviors and stigma. And so I just ask everyone, as the day moves on, to think about that. We don't see differences like this based on individual behaviors. These are systemic issues that are operating full-fledged in our town. So let's see here. So again, I want to offer this for the rest of the day as well. This is our public health framework. And for folks in the room, I think what's really beautiful about this gathering today is we very much have people who are working in our kind of acute urgent care here. Risk behaviors, disease and injury, frontline workers. And I can speak that when talking with my colleagues that, the daily grind of what's being asked of our local agencies, and that's it. That's what you're doing for the day. You might spend a whole day with an individual client or trying to work through a situation. And when we ask community partners then to then step back and say, well, systemically, how would you, propose you fix this whole system? It is so hard to come up for air in those situations that I've taken a lot of pride in my office being able to kind of maybe be the ones that say, okay, we can look at this, we can look at the data, I can offer these. But in the moment, the house is on fire, and so we really do want to focus on those acute needs in the community. We've got a lot of folks in the room who are working at the other end with our institutions and our systems. And so when we break out into the action items section, I think where you land along this, on this spectrum here, and what you can bring. And also recognize that the people in your group might be working at one end or the other, and to kind of understand where everyone's coming from and their suggestions. So I would say, just from my standpoint with the Office of Local Health, some of our biggest challenges are kind of bringing all the data together. We have a ton of data just from the Vermont Department of Health, but when we think about things like siren data, police department data, healthcare data, and pulling all that together to tell a story, and to really make it clear what we are seeing, why we are seeing it, and what we can do to go forward. A lot of times that can be misconstrued with having to prove. And I think I've heard that from a lot of community partners too. Like we're tired of having to continually prove that we need the resources or that this is a problem. And so with data, can't argue with the data. I think another challenge that we've noticed is we can't program our way out of a lot of the challenges that are facing the community. And Governor Scott, you mentioned a 2-year legislative cycle. A lot of times that's the way our grant cycles work as well. Fix this in 2 years and make sure it's sustainable when you're done. So it's one of my favorite criteria. And then again, back to our health equity word and the buzzword. Health equity work is grueling and it takes a lot of work. And it's dismantling systems, recognizing the inequities and the built-in oppression and power that's built in there, and being able to really look at it and dismantle it. And it takes a lot longer than 2 years to do that. So I would say that's one of our bigger challenges. We really need ability to have a long-term plan for a lot of this work. Thank you.
Hi, good morning. My name is Todd Salzhold. I am the program manager for Bennington Blueprint, which is the Bennington chapter of a large organization called the Vermont Blueprint for Health. For anyone that might not be aware, Vermont Blueprint for Health is across all counties throughout Vermont with really one simple charge, and that is to improve the health of all Vermonters, cradle to grave, regardless of ability to pay. So this is essentially a free program that's offered to Vermonters. So you could have either Medicaid or you could have a Cadillac insurance plan, and regardless of your ability to pay or lack of ability to pay, services of Blueprint are available to you. This is done through a team of nurses, case managers, behavioral health therapists that are offered throughout all of these programs. The one probably most applicable here piece of Blueprint is the hub and spoke system, which for anyone who may not be aware, Vermont has an extraordinarily unique treatment system. Really, you could not find anything comparable to this anywhere else in the country, where it's two bi-directional organizations. It's a hub, which if you travel outside of Vermont, and it's much more than this, but just to put it in a nutshell, would be what someone might think of as a methadone clinic. And then we have our spoke system, which is a lower level of care. And generally, these are organizations that provide Suboxone. Many of them are located within primary care offices, so the person can receive primary care, but also be treated for an opioid use disorder or a particular substance use disorder. And really, the big difference between the two is spokes are not able to prescribe are not able to prescribe methadone, and the hubs prescribe methadone. And essentially they may be like a 5-day-a-week program. Hubs are more designed for people who have a more intense opioid use disorder and need essentially like a higher level of treatment. So one of the pieces that we seem to have a bit of a struggle with here in Bennington is access to the appropriate level of care. We have an extraordinarily robust spoke system. So really, any person who is interested in receiving treatment for an opioid use disorder can walk into any one of these organizations and receive treatment that day. So basically, you can walk into a spoke, and within a couple of hours, you can have a prescription for Suboxone and also receive some of the services that are offered by that spoke, such as behavioral health counselors and also nurse case management. The unfortunate piece is treatment works, but it is not one size fits all. So there are a number of people for whom their substance use disorder is so severe, Suboxone really isn't the answer to their recovery. They need a higher level of care. And if that happens to be the case, in Bennington County, we do not have a hub. So for people who need that hub level of care, they are jumping on a bus or jumping in their car, and they are traveling an hour in any given direction to basically receive a nickel's worth of medication and then traveling an hour back. So they're going to Rutland, they're going to North Adams, actually traveling out of state to do this. So the accessibility, the hub services is very, very challenging. This is a level of care that we do need in Bennington, because for folks who, and as we'll get to a little bit in the problem statement, for folks who initiate a treatment, basically show up and say, hey, this doesn't work, they go right back into the substances that they were using previously, which unfortunately are things like, I'm sure everyone's known the scourges of fentanyl, xylazine. We have some worse stuff that's coming out now that we're seeing. So the options are, unfortunately, pretty negative for these folks. So it's the hub level of services that are really, really essential, I believe, here in Bennington County. We have great partners like Margate Diamond with Turning Point, who you'll hear from a little bit later, who does the frontline work with folks who are struggling with substance use disorder. Her team essentially navigates folks into treatment, into inpatient treatment, into the spoke world, and I'm sure she'll be able to let you know that it's a challenge, because sometimes if the person does not have that access to treatment, and a lot of times when a person says, I want to enter into treatment, it has to be immediate. You kind of have to strike while the iron is hot. If you have to tell a person, great, you want to get into treatment? Well, you have to wait a week. Or if you want to get into treatment, yeah, okay, just jump in your car and you have to drive an hour. That person, chances are, if you didn't, get the person in that moment, is not going to engage in treatment. We'll see here in a little bit, I do have some statistics regarding what we look at as initiation, which we have great initiation in Bennington County. People who are diagnosed with a substance use disorder making it to that first appointment, we have very good rates of that. Where we tend to drop off a little bit is our engagement, which is the person to sustain their presence in treatment. And a lot of times, as I mentioned before, this has a lot to do with the diversity of treatment options that are available to people. So you'll hear me kind of hammer away on this piece over and over again, because I just think diversity and expansion of our existing treatment system is going to play a huge role in getting Vermont to getting Bennington headed in the right direction. So again, this probably won't be the first time I discuss diversity and expansion of the treatment system, but that's kind of what we see from our standpoint. Thank you.
So in an effort to keep us on time and to be able to have a break, which we have a plan for a break at 10:40, we're going to continue on with the problem statements. And we will have time this afternoon for small groups where everyone can really participate. And I encourage everyone at lunch to, find someone if you have questions, if there's something you've heard that you'd like some clarification on, or you have a question, please seek each other out during lunch, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. So now we're going to have a presentation on the problem statements. To give you a little bit of background, at the direction of the governor, we've been asked to do a series of focus groups that convened in the last month. And that set the stage for our afternoon small group discussions and action steps. Out of these focus groups, that you will hear about the different ones, emerged these specific problem statements. We know that these are not the only problems, but these were ones that strongly came out of these focus groups. There were 6 different topics. We also realized that not everyone got to participate in these focus groups. And we want to make sure that in our community, this is a really inclusive process. We really want to include everyone. We're very thankful so many people showed up today, but we know there are many, many more people in the community of Bennington that will want to participate in this work. And so we want to make sure that the word gets out, that this is really an open process, and that we want all of our community residents to participate going forward. And that will be one of our challenges, to really organize in ways that are inviting to all of our residents in our community. So I'll ask now the people who will come up to read these problem statements. Maybe if all of you can come up, all 6 of you, that would be great, because we're just going to read them quickly, and then we'll take a break. And then we're going to come back, and Colonel Baker is going to lead us into a quick roundtable before lunch. So if I could have Natalie come up, please, and Margay. So Natalie Basil is representing the Faith Community and Social Services. Margay Diamond is from Turning Point, Recovery and Lived Experience. Kate Abbott from Education and Prevention. Todd Salvesvold, again, and Alex Figueroa from Treatment. Lieutenant Cam Grandy, assisted by Jared Bianchi, Kyle Hoover on Criminal Justice, and Zach Hale on Housing. Okay, so Natalie, would you like to?
Hi everyone, good morning. Natalie Basil with GBICS, which is Greater Bennington Community Services. I'm the executive director of that local nonprofit organization. It has 3 anchor programs: an emergency needs fund, it's the home of the Bennington Free Clinic, and the Kitchen Cupboard Food Distribution Program.
our problem statement. Based on stigma and a lack of widespread understanding of the impacts of generational poverty and trauma, there is an embedded distrust of individuals who are in need of public assistance, resources, and services that leads to a system rooted in resource guarding, fueled by a scarcity mindset. Individuals and families are made to over and over prove their need and disclose personal, often highly sensitive information in order to access services. This model creates a feeling of shame and distrust, and it's an added burden on individuals and families who are already under significant stress. Individuals and families who are experiencing generational poverty, trauma, and mental health needs or navigating substance use disorders are more impacted by this stigma. The impact of this resource-guarded system can be seen on those who try to access the resources, individuals and families, and on those who work within the system, social service agencies and local nonprofits. Agencies are impacted by staff burnout, which leads to staffing turnover and high job vacancy rates within a local structure that believes that these few agencies will be able to solve the robust challenges created by this system. This results in agencies and employees being oversaturated with the amount of direct service needs, and they struggle to make lasting system-wide change that could include prevention or in developing sustainable infrastructures, including the funding and generating funding to support their services within the agencies and community. During COVID, our community and others across the state saw the benefit of lower barriers in accessing assistance and additional funding directly to individuals and to service agencies. The federal, state, and local systems have not fully integrated what was learned when a resource-abundant mindset was being used. By shifting community awareness and understanding of the dynamics around and impact of generational poverty and trauma, including substance use and mental health, along with using what was learned when the system allowed for more flexibility and less rigidity around resources, we can work to interrupt this cycle to help individuals and families move beyond its impact and prevent others from getting caught inside.
Hi there, I'm Margay Diamond. I'm the director for Turning Point Recovery Center. Turning Point has been around for quite a while. We work very closely with the hospital and provide peer coaching in the emergency room. We also work in concert with rescue and the police department to do outreach for overdoses that are called in. And we are constantly working with people all along the spectrum from harm reduction into sustained recovery. Our focus group was around lived experience and harm reduction. The town of Bennington has a tough exterior masking a more fragile interior, much like the people who suffer from substance use disorder. Untreated trauma and mental health conditions, alongside intergenerational poverty, are fueling the situation. The SUD crisis has impacted every single area of our community, produced unprecedented violence and trauma, and has strained all systems. Increased contamination of the drug supply will add to the needs. We see that many people seeking recovery make attempts only to be met with barriers and contempt. There are evident holes in comprehensive treatment and supported recovery from our perspective, especially as compared to other counties in the state, for example, recovery housing. Top considerations of our lived experience group: supervised inpatient 5-day detox for alcohol and opioids, access to longer-term inpatient treatment past 2 weeks, methadone clinic, short-term respite beds for relapse and those awaiting treatment, recovery housing, dedicated transportation, more mental health professionals. We see many people cycling through repeatedly without achieving sustained recovery directly because of these gaps. We envision a centralized hub. A hub, as we defined it, means one location with all services under one roof. a clear entryway for people needing recovery or related mental health support. Equally as important is mobile outreach. Transportation is a very real barrier. A more daunting challenge is the issue of stigma. It is the #1 factor preventing people from seeking help. SUD is a chronic health condition, and many chronically relapse until fully entering recovery. Punitive measures for those with SUD, including incarceration, further traumatize individuals and make them less likely to enter and sustain recovery. Combating stigma includes widespread public education, vocal support from town leadership for treatment and recovery, training and compassion fatigue support for frontline workers, and a commitment to reintegrating people back into the community through structured workforce development. The harm in our community extends beyond the headlines of overdoses and gun violence. Those exiting corrections or treatment facilities in or outside Bennington are not effectively linked to the next level of care in a systemic way that allows for individuals to be trapped across systems. They fall through the cracks and re-enter the system anew, adding more stress and trauma. Our group pointed to the significant increase in human trafficking, particularly of women. The ways people are being treated both in the system and outside is producing immense mental and physical harm with lasting psychological ramifications for the person, their family, and the next generation. We want to imagine a new approach. How can we work to simultaneously provide cross-functional medical and social services in a centralized way and with mobile outreach? How do we begin to treat SUD as a true public health crisis and respond with radical compassion? How can we remove barriers and offer all harm reduction methods and recovery supports? What shifts need to be made to honestly embrace restorative justice practices and alternatives such as drug courts? How can we ensure everyone has safe housing so healing can begin? We look forward to finding solutions together.
Good morning, my name is Zach Hale with Hale Resources. We're a real estate developer and property manager in Bennington in about 200 units. This problem statement was created by a group of us, about 10 individuals, all very involved in housing. It wasn't really a focus group at first, but we're actually creating a housing committee, and we plan to meet regularly each month. So, but our first meeting, we talked about this. So it was it's a new group. So our problem statement is the Bennington community is facing a severe housing crisis that demands immediate attention. Market failure has resulted in a lack of appropriate housing at all income levels, which is compounded by challenges such as zoning regulations, limited funding, and a shortage of workforce and services. Moreover, high crime rates, drug abuse, hoarding, and mental health problems are exacerbating the situation. Resolving the housing challenges in Bennington requires a comprehensive and coordinated approach that involves regulatory changes to streamline the development process, increase funding opportunities for developers, and a more collaborative approach from law enforcement. To ensure that everyone has access to suitable housing, more focused data is needed, and the community must work to combat the stigma associated with developers' roles in the community, affordable housing, and mental health issues. It is also crucial for state officials and lawmakers to be involved in the effort to support the community and provide the necessary resources for development. Addressing the housing crisis in Bennington demands a coordinated approach to tackle underlying issues, promote growth and development, and ensure that everyone has access to healthy and safe housing. By addressing these underlying issues, establishing shared goals, and developing a vision for growth and development, the community can overcome these obstacles and thrive. Thank you.
I am Kate Abbott from the Southwest Vermont Supervisory Union. The Southwest Vermont Supervisory Union is committed to developing lifelong learners who contribute to their community and succeed in a diverse and evolving global society. The focus group discussed barriers to achieving the mission. based on clinician, counselor, family engagement, prevention coordinator, and homeless liaison feedback. There are unmet mental health and addiction needs and available supports that aren't being utilized by families. Children in our community are arriving at school with unmet needs as parents are experiencing multidimensional problems, including substance use and mental health needs. There are wait lists in our community for clinical services, lack of access to developmental pediatric services, and services for victims of trauma. There are no visible treatment options for students who are growing up with a caregiver who is addicted. No treatment, i.e. outpatient programming, exists for students who are using substances. We currently have one grant-funded prevention coordinator who provides prevention and early intervention services at the middle school, but not treatment. Legalization of marijuana has made the substance more accessible. There's a population of parents, guardians, and caregivers that do not utilize systems or resources because of a lack of trust. This creates a barrier to accessing support and prevents students and families from coming to the table as partners. Students with adverse childhood experiences struggle with academic, social, emotional, and behavioral concerns. These complex issues require specialized care and professional learning. Staff turnover and unfilled positions at the school level impact the implementation of our specialized care.
Thank you. My name is Jared Bianchi, I'm the Deputy State's Attorney, looking for American Markers that I'm trying to have here. And the criminal justice policy statement is as follows. The criminal justice community sees three overarching themes contributing to the increased violence, substance use, and repetitive trauma impacting Bennington. Essentially, public safety officials are being tasked with treating a public health crisis, and public health services are often charged with addressing public safety. For those who need public health services, there is a lack of services overall, especially those local, easily accessed, and timely treatment for substance use disorder and acute mental health. Without embedded case management within the Bennington Police Department, there are missed opportunities to connect those in need, even to currently available services. By extension, we see a single point of entry for services as key. For those persons who present an acute public safety challenge, the problem is no better. This issue presents with a small number of very serious offenders who are responsible for a disproportionate share of serious criminal matters. Frontline human services workers or medical workers are frequently made responsible for people who are unsuitable for or unwilling to accept treatment interventions. Those workers are tasked with the impossible responsibilities that are unsafe for those workers with no law enforcement training or infrastructure. These same people are sometimes simply released back to the community who they continue to victimize. In these rare instances, law enforcement and prosecutors are hamstrung by one-size-fits-all limitations on the prompt exercise of professional discretion. This results in a lack of safety for law enforcement, human services workers, and members of the community. Environmental factors also contribute. We know places can mask and even drive such behavior. The community's housing instability leaves citizens in unsafe residence or the cycle of the hotel voucher system. Their neighbors need to break the silence around concerns they see in and around those homes. The entire community needs to acknowledge these issues are here and enter collective effort to address them, not one that stigmatizes the helpers or those in need. The capacity of those on the front lines also contributes. Law enforcement and community justice members are exhausted, experiencing PTSD and empathy fatigue, while facing and refacing these serious crises. We are all operating in a reactionary mode without the time or capacity to do the preventative work that we know builds strong communities. We all recognize communication and connectivity are needed across our work and with the partners in the application.
Hi, Todd Salzvold again. I had the pleasure of serving on the treatment focus group, whose statement is as follows. Substance use disorders are chronic diseases. Like all chronic diseases, substance use disorders are treatable through pathways that address both the medical and mental health aspects of the disease. Recovery is possible, However, barriers across medical, mental health, and socioeconomic supports challenge long-term recovery. The key themes identified by the leaders in the treatment focus group centered on making treatment accessible, in particular, easy to access in the moment, appropriate, and affordable. Commonly, we hear that we need more recovery beds. However, the need is broader. We need more avenues for individuals to seek treatment in a way that will work for them, as treatment modalities are not one size fits all. The focus on access to care should address access to medical services, mental health services, various levels of care to include acute inpatient services and a multitude of outpatient treatment options to include a methadone hub in our local community. Harm reduction initiatives must be woven into these access points as well. The need for an expanded treatment ecosystem may be evident in the initiation and engagement rates across the county. While treatment initiation rates for all substances improved significantly between 2017, where we were at 37%, and 2021, 49%, our engagement rates continue to trend downward from a high of 35% in 2019 to 26% in 2021. Furthermore, treatment engagement rates specifically for opioid use disorder dropped to 49% in 2021 from its high of 62% in 2019. These data points confirm that there is a need for a broader treatment system that will allow individuals to enter into a level of recovery appropriate to their circumstances, thereby increasing the likelihood of long-term treatment engagement and success. Ease of access is appropriate to care as well. However, keep in mind that affordability should reflect holistic expenses of treatment, of recovery treatment, including the cost of travel, time out of work, and not only the direct cost of care. We challenge this group to identify bridges for the gaps in the recovery ecosystem of care and ways to eliminate these barriers to ensure that treatment is both accessible, appropriate, and affordable for this community.
Thank you. I really feel that, these problem statements are excellent, and I believe you all have copies, and this is the work you will all be doing this afternoon in small groups. So I'm going to just say a little bit about the rest of the day before we take our break. So we're going to take a break now for about 20-25 minutes. So feel free, again, that'll have time to talk to people you might want to seek out and ask questions or make comments. Then we will come back and Colonel Baker will be leading us in a roundtable, which I think will be really helpful and interesting. And then we'll break for lunch. Lunch will be served out here, and so feel free to get your lunch, bring it back in here, go anywhere in the building that you would like, again, with people that you might want to talk about. We're going to come back at 12:30 though. Lunch will be served at noon. We're going to come back here all together, so you can have your lunch here as well. And Shannon Barsati, our Community Development Director. Shannon, raise your hand. Right, Shannon's back there. And Zach Hale, who you've just met, are going to do a short presentation for us on the Ben High project on Pleasant Street, which is another really exciting development project in Bennington that some people know about, but maybe a lot of people don't. So we're looking forward to having them share this project with us. And then we will really get down to the work of today. So this is like a really important piece where this afternoon, Lorna will help me divide up everyone into smaller groups that will connect with the problem statements that you just heard. And so we're kind of dividing you up randomly to make sure that the groups really, maybe you meet some new people. If you really feel strongly that you want to be in another group that you haven't been.
Nope, don't give them that.
Okay, we don't want too many people shifting groups.
Talk about flexibility, I'm going with Richard.
All right. We're going to divide up in our groups. We're going to have a charge of 3 action steps. We'll talk more about this afternoon. But we're gonna come up here and each group will have a column and they will put their 3 action steps that will come out of the problem statements. And then we have an important announcement to make at 3:15. So I hope everybody can stick around for that. So anyway, thank you so much again for coming, and we'll take a break now and come back, why don't we say, right before 11, right? Like 5 of 11 would be great to settle down. Thank you.
This slide that I had up this morning, and I wanted to put it back up for a minute. There's a reason. And this is not a reflection of anything other than, this is the police data that the chief and the lieutenant get every day in their system, the calls for service that they respond to. And so when Josiah started doing the heat map, there were categories and areas focused around the violence piece because that was the original focus. And as things move along, we hope to blend other data into that. Hopefully some public health data to start getting a clearer picture of where public health merges with public safety. But the thing I forgot to mention is, take a look at that 55%. So when we saw this slide, I immediately talked to the planning group, which, you know what, the planning group that planned this wasn't Jim Baker. For the planning group that planned this, could you stand up for a minute? Stand up. Stand up. When this slide came up at one of the Wednesday meetings that I sit in with the leadership of the state, I immediately called some friends from the network for sexual and domestic violence. And when we start thinking about the areas to focus in on to lower the harm in the community, this should jump off the charts to you. There should be a real serious conversation when we're done about how we're going to focus on the individuals that are causing the most harm in domestic situations and how to deal with them. 52% of their violent calls are going directly to domestic violence calls. So we did a focus group. Myself and Deputy Commissioner Basie did a focus group with some youth at the CDC. Where's the youth? She bought us pizza. CRJ, right? I know. Like, wasn't that guy the Commissioner of Corrections at one time, right? We had this cute little button there, this just cute little kid, probably no older than 10 or 12 years old. She probably said, when we asked, what are the problems that you see as a youth? She must have said to us right Dan 4 times, domestic violence. A couple of the kids said, you know what Bennington needs to focus on is harm reduction. I mean, a couple of these kids would be commissioners of some agencies. I mean, they get it, right? Because they see this and the damage is being done. And I suspect those kids come after school every day because they don't want to go home. They don't want to go home. So they go to a safe place that is a pretty cool environment where they feel safe and they feel like they can talk. So what we're going to do is, and I have said to people, try to keep this to 3 minutes. I want to highlight some of the good work that's going on in the community that we learned about as we've been on this journey since December. And I think I'm going to start with, Dan, would you talk about the conversation that's going on with the network? Commissioner Levine's involved in this conversation. Around the work, since this is an issue, the conversation that has broken out, and to set the stage, Commissioner Levine, on one of the Wednesday calls, you brought this up, that we really, from a public health standpoint, we should really start focusing on this domestic violence piece. So could you just talk a little bit about what's going on there?
Sure, you bet. So obviously domestic violence is pervasive across the heat map and is a common theme we heard in all of the focus groups and all of our conversations. With the good work of the network, it was brought up that there needs to be some more influencers, there needs to be some more voices into this for prevention of domestic violence. And since public safety is a pretty visible group of individuals, both law enforcement and EMS and fire as well, we decided to work on a project called Not in My House, which with the expertise of the network We'll work to train some of those influencers and to begin to focus outward to say that kind of behavior, this kind of problem is not acceptable to us as public safety professionals, as people of influence. So right now, and by the way, the lion's share of the work is on the network over there. They're the ones that are really driving this. But they are putting together a concept. We've been already working with EMS. We've heard back from a number of fire departments and EMS departments that are interested in taking part in this, and we're going to drag some of our law enforcement colleagues, ask some of our law enforcement colleagues to help us out with it as well. But we're really looking forward to that aspect of how we can influence this problem.
Thank you, Dan. Appreciate that. So, Leith, can I go back to you, just talk about, I think Dan and I were so impressed the day we were there about the work, and I was aware of the work, and let me just say this, and I think the folks in corrections are going to agree with me. You know, you're Center for Restorative Justice, so I got it right that time. Within corrections, who helps you with some of your funding, you are recognized in the state as a leader when it comes to restorative justice. But you do more than restorative justice, and I think that's the point I want to make. Can you talk a little bit about the kids and your shop that you have there where kids can come? And,
sure, thank you. Thank you for recognizing the work we do. It is, what we did start doing a few years back was we recognized a lot of the kids we work with either don't want to go home after school, need a safe place to turn to for mentors and to feel they have a place they can turn to if school, we have kids that are suspended from school, show up at our doorstep saying, can I just hang out here till the after school program starts? We give them food, we give them snacks, we give them games. They just want to hang out. They don't want any kind of organized activities. So we just started this drop-in program after school, and we average maybe 15 to 20 kids dropping in every day after school. These are the kids that are not joining the soccer team or the drama club. These are kids that are seeing things happening at home. And then the other piece I just want to take a second to, the other thing we just developed was, it's a shop called Threads. It's a clothing boutique, and everything in Threads is free, and it is teen clothing. It's run by teens, for teens, and it was developed because kids were telling us they're skipping school, they don't feel comfortable, they're getting bullied because they don't have clothes to wear. So we started this boutique. It's this really cool boutique. I think you got to see it, and it is having an incredible impact on kids just to keep them going to school every day, feeling good about themselves, expressing who they are. So yeah, we don't wait for money to fall in our laps. If we see a need, we just develop what we think is needed. So thank you.
Thank you. So when we start thinking about places to catch people and kids that are in need, they're there every day. So what other services can you bring there to intervene with those kids? They're there every day. Same kids, and they're very thoughtful, and they're not afraid to challenge you. Because I think Dan and I found that out that day. Not afraid to, they talk about playing some tag game. I had to ask what it was, and this one young lady looks at me and goes, "You don't know what that is?" "No, not at 67 I don't." So along these lines, Margate Diamond, turning point. When we met, you talked about collaboration, and you gave an example of what you did, I think in December, around the holidays. But the key thing for me was the collaboration that you reached out for other folks. Could you talk about that a little bit, please?
Sure. Well, it was about November, and I and a few other people that I am in my orbit started talking about how people were going to be stacked up in motels during the winter months, isolated. What had happened during COVID was not great, and so in an effort to get ahead of that situation, we came together, and it was kind of an ad hoc group of putting together a group consisting of Savita, Syringe Services, Bennington County Coalition for the Homeless, PAVE, Rescue, and a public health nurse And we came together and reformulated the harm reduction bags that are given to us by the state. Those come with Narcan, some state information, fentanyl test strips. We retool those bags regularly to include Bennington specific information, but we further retooled them. We have been including wound care kits, which we've been making based off supplies that Savita was able to get for us. We included a slip on human trafficking given to us by PAVE. And we, of course, had public health resources and insurance services with us to provide on-the-spot services if needed. We looked at the list of hotels that economic services were placing people in, and then we overlaid that with rescues, subjective look and saying, here are the hot spots. So we narrowed it down to 7 locations, and we went out twice a week, banged on doors. If no one answered, we wrapped the bag around the door handle. But we had 3 straight months of going out 2 times a week. We pushed out over 650 doses of Narcan into that population. And anecdotally, looked like Facebook, where I lurk sometimes on the dispatch site, and looked like overdoses being called in was down. But again, we would love data to prove an effort like that. Thank you.
Well, thank you. So again, organically, collaboration bubbling up in the community, right? Somebody gets on the phone and says, hey, I have this idea, and I know Commander Prowley's here, but back in the day when Project Vision launched, the mantra was, there was no stupid ideas. There wasn't dumb ideas. No idea is not accepted. So again, when the phone rings, right, and you reach out, that collaboration. So another point where you're going out to where the people are that may not dial 211 or dial an 800 number or go online to look for services, coming to them. And again, anecdotal, but it sounds like it made an impact in that little area around overdoses, and that's what struck me. Let me get my notes straight here. Dan Greer, I did get a chance to meet you. Thank you for coming. Dan is the regional vice president, I think, of Paymark. They are, in fact, the vendor coming with the hub. So he agreed to speak a little bit about it, and I'll set the stage. No promises of when this is going to happen, because you're in the process. But I think for you to be here is a shot in the arm of hope for the community, because they've been waiting a long time for a hub. So Dan, take it away.
Yeah, as I said a little bit earlier, I'm Dan Greer. Very excited to be here. It's a very inspiring meeting, to be perfectly honest with you. With the help of guys like Judge Markey over here and Megan, we've been able to get our plans together to get a hub opened in Bennington. That is a long process, and Jim had warned me that the certificate of need process was going to be very, very long, and it is involved, but we are in that process right now. We've got a location and we've got some targets, so we're hoping to have some very good news for the community within the next few months. And that's about what I've got. I think we're getting there, so we should be opening here very shortly.
Thank you, Dan. Dan, I appreciate making the time to be here, because I know you're busy with that effort. How about let's move it up a little bit. Lieutenant Grandy, you and I spoke a little bit about the challenges around staffing, and you just can't, you can't write all the search warrants you can write, right?
No.
It takes a long time. So talk a little bit about your knock and talk program.
And that's what we did. A couple of years ago, we realized that we were not going to be able to build cases on certain properties that were known to us to distribute fentanyl. We were receiving a lot of complaints from residents within a couple of buildings, landlords, and working with Erica in her office. We met and said, listen, we were having trouble developing a case for this, for 2 particular houses. After that meeting, we decided that it was just going to be a knock and talk. And we the chief and I, a couple of our investigators, put some cruisers out in front of the property, and then we went and we knocked, and some people came to the door and others hid, which was surprising. But yeah, we basically told them that we knew what was happening there, that we wanted them to stop, that if they didn't stop, eventually we would build a case. And the next time we showed up at the door, it wasn't going to be a knock and talk. It was going to be an arrest and present a case to Erica's office. In one particular case, it worked. The individual who had set up basically what they call a trap house packed up their stuff and returned back to New York City. But that has proven, when there's a lot of time and effort that goes into these investigations. It's not like you watch on TV. You don't get everything solved within an hour. It does take a lot of time and effort to develop cases and get information, work with the prosecutor's office, and so going there and just having that conversation and letting them know that we knew it was taking place here, letting them know what they were doing to the neighborhood and what other tenants were experiencing. Worked with one, didn't work with the other.
Thank you, Jim. So one of the things that the planning group's been talking about is what happens when something like an arrest or you convince someone there's a better place to live, and what happens when that there's an interruption in supply, right, for those who are addicted, and how do you get resources out in coordination with when that happens? So I think that's another point to be thinking about when you're talking about planning through the effort that's starting today. How do you coordinate those services? You've interrupted supply. There's people that are desperately in need of getting the product because they're in trouble. And how do you get the resources out to them to try to do an intervention? How do you coordinate that, right? So be thinking about that a little bit. John Rogers. John Rogers introduced himself. He wears about 15 different hats. He's on the board of Pathways. He's a recovery coach. He's deep in his faith. I asked him to get some faith leaders here today because I think the faith community will play a huge role in moving forward. John, could you just talk a little bit about, you and I had a conversation at my office about the work that you want to do on an emerging project, One Together. I think if you would talk just about that for now, to give people an idea of how you think about that and the potential in the future.
Sure, thanks Jim. Yeah, so I'm in addition to being on the board of Pathways and B4 and being an elder at Mission City Church, we run a 12-step recovery program on Wednesday nights in Bennington. When we've been doing this will be the 6th year. So sort of boots on the ground, being out there with folks struggling with substance use disorder, and just sort of seeing it at the organizational level, at the state, Pathways. It became obvious to me there was some gaps. And one of the gaps I saw was why wasn't there more church folk volunteering? And this whole stigma thing that we talk a lot about, I was sort of running into it head on. So if we show up on Sunday morning and we hear that the disciples asked Jesus Christ, you did a lot of cool stuff, but what's the most important thing? And Jesus says to his disciples, love God with all your heart, mind, and soul, and then love others like yourself. And so we hear that, those that go to church hear it every week, in some form or fashion, it's love others. Yet these organizations that are loving on others aren't getting the Christians to come alongside. So I sat down with Hillary Menton and I said, why haven't you been able to tap into the church? There's tens of thousands of people that profess to know and follow Jesus. Why don't you tap into them? And she goes, I don't know how. And I'm like, well, let's figure out how. So Mark, this is an idea. It's a pilot. We're going to start here in Bennington County. Hillary's supporting it. And I'm calling it One Another. And it's really a simple idea. It's equip folks that go to church with basic training, intentional peer support, which is what Pathways uses, and marry that with something that COSA uses, which is sort of a team approach to supporting people as they try to reacclimate into the community, and build some teams from the church to go out and break through the stigma. So the idea is to have 10 teams of 3 that will match up with one person who's either in a V4 house or in a Pathways house, or maybe we access through Turning Point, someone who is fighting for sobriety and then gets sober and stays sober, and we're just going to circle them with some people that care and just do life on life.
Thank you, John. When we went around, there's at least one other, I heard at least one other person from the faith community and a Red Sox fan, so. Yeah, I know. I notice I'm not wearing anything Red Sox fan. We'll see where we're going to go here. But thank you for coming. And the faith community, my experience going back to my days in Rome, I see Matt shaking his head. The faith community was a backbone of the effort in so anyway, anything you'd like to share?
Yeah, well, I get to actually pastor the church that John Rogers is an elder of, so everything he's saying, man, this man is way wiser than me in many ways, in all ways, really, I'd say. So I'm just following his lead with a lot of these things, it's incredible. But I will say the B, let's just say it stands for Bennington. I'm from actually Alabama. Yeah. Let me just put that out there, right? I had no idea when I bought this hat what it was going to cost. So, yeah. Sorry, some of you folks. You're welcome, some of you folks. Yeah. I'm originally from Alabama, so a lot of this is new, right? But yes, I guess just to reiterate quickly, I am thankful to be here. I've talked to some friends here, Alex and some others, and oftentimes I wonder what part that a church can play in a moment like this. And the biggest thing that I want to say, just to reiterate and to bring some hope, you guys are doing some incredible things, and I'm thankful and hopeful that people like me and even some of you in this room that do have faith, that we can lean in and actually say, what you're doing is amazing. We believe that there's some power and some spiritual elements that we can bring to the table to really bring lasting transformation, which is what I'm hopeful for. And then to bring manpower, to bring initiatives, to bring all these things that John's spoken of and that we'll talk about. But I'm thankful to be here and just see what will happen.
Thanks so much for coming. Paula Schuler. So Paula reached out for me, and she's working on a concept, and I hope I get this right. Invitation to change approach.
Exactly.
How'd I do?
That's it.
So would you like to share that, please?
Okay. All right. So the invitation to change approach grew out of the nonprofit arm of the Center for Motivational Change. It's right here in our own backyard, the New York and Berkshires. It's developed by 3 psychologists who wrote their groundbreaking book, Beyond Addiction. Okay? So I've started an ITC group housed in Arlington Commons in Arlington, who's graciously provided space for this free community events. And I've already started networking since I've been here, and Lori from UCS is on board, so after my brief presentation, I'll keep it brief, I have a handout, if anyone else is interested in adopting this program. So what is the ITC? The ITC brings evidence-based principles and practices, including kindness, together in a way that lay people, family, friends, first responders, educators, faith-based leaders, and health professionals of all kinds can use in their efforts to help a person struggling with substance abuse or other problematic behaviors. It's an evolutionary, I think, progression and development of what a lot of people are already doing. It helps fill in this gap of providing support, not only for the family, but to the person suffering from substance abuse. You know, as clinicians, we're taught the importance of all the research about the family and the treatment not only of substance abuse, but other health and behavioral problems as well. So the ITC offers this in a beautifully structured, evidence-based, jargon-free way, then provides ongoing support and resources, not only for certified providers but for the public in general. So this could be used as a peer model, like a self-help group. It could be used individually with families or with groups. And just having this resource, which is free, on our websites and the information in our offices is a start for all our clients, probation, CFJ, mental health, everywhere. Since 2003, the CMC has partnered with the Partnership to End Addiction to provide specialized training for their parent coaching program. So the evidence, I'm going to be brief, but the evidence-based approaches that the ITC draws on is CRAFT, Community Reinforcement Approach, and Family Training, which we're probably familiar with, and that's part of the family tree of the ITC. Motivational interviewing, we all know that, right? Acceptance and commitment therapy, and family systems impact studies. So if you're interested, I think that I'll be able to organize a presentation. There's a PowerPoint presentation. It'd be lovely to have a team, a collaboration. Ken and Jeff, the founders, are still available, and they can also do it for us. And I just want to end with one quote, okay? Okay, so this is the quote from Thomas McClellan. He's the Executive Director, Treatment Research Institute, former Deputy Director of the Office of National Drug Control Policy. I am an expert in substance abuse, quoted all the time, but I can never apply all that so-called expertise when it really counted in my own family. I had a scientific knowledge, but no practical tools to help me and my affected family cope and return to sanity. This book I intended to read as a professional courtesy and to offer editorial, perhaps scientific comments. Instead, I found myself asking notes on every chapter and Xeroxing some of the handy tables. 2 weeks after reading the book, both my sons and I are using these basic lessons and specific techniques with my grandkids.
Thank you, Paul. Paul is a negotiator. When I told her about 3 minutes, she said 5. I just negotiated 3 in 45 seconds. Very good. Another example, though, seriously, it reminds me of a potential opportunity to do community training around something that will bring connectivity. That, I mean, I hear this from Mark Gazeroy. Connectivity is an important part of recovery. Being connected, having a support system is an important part of recovery. So, we have some more folks, and I'm trying to be conscious of time. How about Bill Camardi from Bennington Rescue Squad? The Deputy Commissioner was telling me that there's this concept, for us cops in the room, community policing is one thing, but there's this concept emerging in EMS called community paramedic. And I thought maybe you could share that with the group.
Yeah, so thank you, everybody. Just as a real quick, we don't get to say thank you. We don't hear thank you enough. We definitely don't get to say thank you enough. For our crew, we'd like to thank the folks at UCS, especially Bill, LL here in the room, who provide us with a lot of care for our own crew when we have that acute, delayed, or cumulative stress. The things that we see, a lot of the people in this room, are things that no human being are supposed to see on a daily basis. And you see it repeatedly on a daily basis. So thank you for that support system that's out there. We appreciate it, and next is peer support for our own crew that we're looking to build in too. So we'll be in touch. I just want to touch on a few themes I've heard throughout today too. Listening to those problem statements, which really should actually be opportunity statements. I like to approach everything from a positive point of view, and I love to throw education at problems too. But we hear generational trauma, the stigma to access, barriers to entry, public safety doing public health, and vice versa. Can we imagine a new approach? Remove barriers to harm reduction and recovery support, make it local, easily accessible, timely treatment, and cross-functional approach. So community paramedicine is trying to bridge some of those gaps. It's also known as mobile integrated healthcare. That's what the folks up at UVM and EMS District 3 are using as terminology. And we're trying to dovetail onto that project right now. We're working with the Vermont EMS office and the state medical director to introduce an EMS buprenorphine program out there in the field. So for acute withdrawal cases, this could be somebody calling for withdrawal symptoms or somebody who's just received Narcan. Providing a medication-assisted therapy out in the field to, number one, hopefully get people into that system of recovery, whether it's transport to the emergency department or it's a direct referral to our friends over at Turning Point, and having a warm handoff on scene with a recovery coach or someone else in the community that can provide that assistance right there in the moment. And that's what mobile integrated healthcare is all about. Connecting people to resources that aren't necessarily an ambulance or an emergency department. We all know that those are choke points in the system, and we are all used, whether it's public safety, EMS, or the ED, as the safety net. And we get called because the number is easy and we've trained people way too well. That 911 is when you have a problem, when they should be calling 211 or one of the other resources. So this would be the first in that kind of model of care, of bringing people care in the field that doesn't meet necessarily the threshold of an emergency. So that's my soapbox. Thanks, everybody.
No, I appreciate you bringing up, and because this, I wrote myself a note, but I couldn't read my handwriting, I guess. As Dan and I made the journey around town meeting with groups, we were struck by the damage that's being done to providers. Dan and I talked about this a couple of times. We were struck by the damage being done to caretakers. It's just not the police department, we know. I mean, I had a long conversation with the lieutenant about this. The damage being done to the caretakers. So, as you move forward, I would challenge you to think about, harm people can't help harm people. So you got to focus on something that's taking care of the responders, the folks that are out there every day. And I challenge you to be thinking about that as you move forward. I have a couple more, and then we're going to break for lunch. But Natalie, where's Natalie? Natalie's right there. From GBIGS. Greater Bennington Interfaith
Greater Bennington Community Services.
I remember, I go so far back, I remember that's free clinic.
Yep.
Right? So,
Yes.
right? That's right.
Yeah. So, Jim asked me to talk about one of the initiatives that we are spearheading, and it's a different approach to the work. As we know, humans are complex, and so are our problems, and we don't fall neatly within one service area or one organization to solve that complexity of problems. And what we are challenged by, though, at least in a small nonprofit, is that we just don't have the capacity always to, because we're so oversaturated by the direct services that are coming in and the needs of our community, to do that kind of collaborating and cross-sectional work to move initiatives forward. And so I began hearing from Laura, who I know is back there, in the school system about growing needs around unaccompanied youth. And she was trying to garner some support and say that we're missing something in the community around this. And so we began talking, bringing people together, but again, couldn't get any initiatives moving forward because not any one of our organizations could take on that challenge and figuring out what we could do and need. And there's a secondary need too around our chronically unhoused population and having health equity access and to hygiene and bathroom facilities and services. So we took those two problems. They're complex, they don't fall neatly within one service organization, and we started talking about how we could move that forward. None of us had capacity, but also our skill sets are a little bit different. And so Megan was really great at putting us in touch with the regional commission, the Bennington County, Jonathan and Callie and Jim Sullivan at the time, and now Bill Colvin, and they have a really unique skill set on helping think about that planning and that strategic, and how do you get the data you need, and how do you work together to think about where services are and what that is. And so we got a grant with these two issues in mind, and then funneled that grant money to ask the regional commission to work to do, using their expertise, to help us move these and help us so that we can do that strategic planning and we have an unaccompanied youth report that came out that we're going to be working on in the next week to think about what are the action steps around that. But this idea of using different organizations in your town who have different skill sets to help move things forward is what I wanted to say.
Thank you. Jonathan, raise your hand back there. So how many folks would have walked in here this morning thinking about how do I use the Regional Planning Commission for public health, public safety data, right? And they are a huge asset. That's what they do, planning. That's what they work with every day is data. And Jonathan, anything to add to that?
I think that it's been a really vital couple of years coming out of the pandemic. The skill set in our shop has grown, and we've been finding ways to try to deploy that talent from sort of the sleepy backwaters of zoning bylaw adjustments into some more data and social science ready staff members, and Callie Fishburne is one of them, who joined us as an AmeriCorps volunteer, and we were able to entice her to stay as one of the most recent hires, and her work on this project and other projects has been an invaluable resource that's allowed us to expand what we've been able to offer and to build relationships with new community members, so to speak, or new partners, and retain those relationships in a productive way. So Callie, thank you very much for all you've done.
We're a little bit over, but we have two more. I want to give an opportunity, I promised. And we'll get to lunch and a break in a minute. I do have the flexibility, I guess, right, Susan? I've never been on time for anything anyway, so.
I don't know, I'm ready to jump on you.
Boy, oh boy, I don't want to get on the bad side of you, I can tell you. Lori Vadigan from UCS, right? Lori, when I started back in December, the first person I called was Lori Vadigan, because I've known her for 30 years, and I knew she was at UCS, and I needed someone to give me the lay of the land, because I'd been out of the game down here a while, and your advice and direction was priceless. So, but we talked a lot about this concept of your mobile crisis unit, and you just hotwired a van or something somewhere, stole it, replaced the VIN number, but anyway, tell the story about stealing the van.
Wow, so let me just first say, I want to call out the chief over there. You're absolutely right. We have an incredible community, and we already love each other. So this is just added value to us, Jim, having you come and really have us step into our power. I'm going to also do a little bit of plug on the book. Jim did twist my arm to read the book, and all of you now have the book. Please read this book. So the possibilities are endless. Thank you, Jim, for having us read Bleeding Out. January 2022, UCS opened Finding Access to Services and Treatment FAST, offering immediate counseling and referrals to all social determinants of health. By the end of 2022, we offered 1,392 services. FAST staff are trained to recognize co-occurring disorders, both mental health and substance use disorder. We needed client, John Rogers' wife is my #1 clinician. We needed clients referred for ongoing treatment, and we offer evidence-based treatment with CBT, EMDR, DBT, equine-assisted psychotherapy, and so much more. Imagine using contact tracing with clients right now. Who are you worried about? Who is in your circle? Who is still in the life? Now imagine a fast outreach connection with a stolen van. Just imagine. Yes, it's true. It's sitting at UCS right now. Using hotspot data, we can go out into the community and offer prevention, education, referrals, modeling, and establishing relationships. In this book, Bleeding Out,
He teaches us that punishment alone does not work, nor does prevention alone work, but the tough and soft approaches together offer legitimacy. Look at William Elwell, who, by the way, I did bring into UCS after 2 months of begging him. The counselor is embedded with the state police. The combination offers focus, balance, fairness, and a dynamic connection when responding to calls together. We know over 50% of Bennington PD calls are domestic violence. What if we embed clinicians as partners with law enforcement, utilizing both the soft and tough approach to this hot spot policing? Imagine knocking on a door of a single mother's home where there is a steady flow of questionable activity. Human trafficking, drug deals, being held hostage, where we offer help, assess the risk, and then do intervention. Bennington is a beautiful place to live. I was born and raised here. The issues are in small groups of people, in small hotspot areas. Specific streets, certain corners, or maybe just a drug house. What about a community watch being visible in those areas, working together, contacting state and local police when concerned? What about a gardening group being active in areas of poverty, planting gardens and being open to having children in the neighborhood learning how to grow and plant? What about working with landlords who let multidisciplinary team members work together out of an apartment? Recovery coaches, Margay, can you see us together? People of faith, John, case managers, law enforcement, Laura, educators. Multidisciplinary team members offering robust, year-round groups for youth, allowing a variety of options, interests, and cultural diversity. This is just a little bit of this book. I urge you to read it, and then let's do a big book club.
That's Arthur's work. I think I saw you right there from Sevilla. We're going to wrap it up with, and again, this is, some of it's just my ignorance. I heard about Sevilla and I heard about some of, the work that you're doing there around Suboxone and some of the other medication but it's been sort of like a mystery, right? I don't think, so this is an opportunity, I thought, just to have you talk a little bit about what you've seen for the collaboration from the work that you're doing at Sevilla and the Medicaid assisted programs that you do.
Thank you. So we are Sevilla Health. I represent Sevilla. We have 9 outpatient MAT treatment facilities across the state. We are a super spoke for the state. We do Suboxone treatment. And in Bennington specifically, we have some fantastic partners, Margay, at UCS, all the way around. I mean, we know so many folks. We've been privileged to partner in Bennington on the Winter Task Force that Margay gave us some great information on earlier, donating those wound kits and accessing over, what was it, 650 doses of Narcan at this point in time. We partnered with the hospital and UCS, again, Margay at Turning Point, through the Rapid Access to Treatment for Alcohol Use Disorder program, hosted through the state of Vermont, bringing $17,000 worth of grant monies into the states. That was really fantastic. Everyone that participated in that initiative met and exceeded all of the goals. We reached a 100% milestone mark for that grant award, and were awarded the total monies that could come into the community. And we're constantly connecting with community partners. I've done a little bit of connecting today. We're currently in our Lunch and Learn series here at Sevilla, partnering with some of our community partners and just getting out to the community, connecting and offering ourselves. Here at Sevilla, we really partner MAT with counseling and really wrapping folks as best we can with community supports. We have care teams in-house. And so we are working around the clock to connect with all of our community partners and make sure that those referral pathways, both ways, are really strong and really connected. And we've had great success with that in this region, sending folks over to UCS or connecting folks with Turning Point, connecting with the Public Defender's Office very soon, with Sunrise, all sorts of things. So we're very connected. We're Bennington's largest SUD provider. We serve about 500 folks here in Bennington, and we're right on Main Street if you ever need.
Thank you, guys. We could do this all afternoon. I mean, I could go around as I look around, and Denise May and Sunrise, who's been at it for a long time. I think we won't go there. A long time. We could go around the room. The whole point of this exercise is to get you thinking after lunch, going into the breakout sessions about action items. Okay, a lot of great work going on, people working real hard. I'm going to emphasize to you again, we saw up close the damage being done to the first responders, people working on the ground, the people doing the clinical work. It's taking a toll on the community. And so, be thinking about how you're going to take care of each other, but also, what are some action items moving forward that will lead to an action plan, that will lead to a strategy? And then I'll leave it up to Laura to announce at the end of the day where the working group vision is going. But I think it's going to be exciting, and I think we've got a lot of opportunities. So, lunchtime, break time. Thanks for your hard work this morning. And 1 o'clock, no, not 1 o'clock, 12:30, there'll be a presentation by Zach and Megan about the work being. Shannon, I'm sorry. Sorry, Shannon. It's been a long day. A couple heartbeats, sorry. So, Shannon, I apologize. Shannon and Zach are doing a presentation on the redevelopment of the junior high school. So enjoy lunch. Grab your lunch, come back in, find a seat. The nice part about introducing ourselves, if you already know, Shannon, although I couldn't get Shannon's name right, I called her Megan. But it is Shannon and Zach. We want to, again, talk about some of the good stuff going on in Bennington as you move into the breakout groups later. And there's some, what I think, exciting work going on as they take a look at the former junior high school on Main Street and figure out how they're going to repurpose the building. And I'll let Shannon and Zach take it from there.
Thank you, Jim. And the work that you're doing, I really appreciate it. And this is a very motivating day. Cool. So this is very much a public-private partnership. The town is definitely the one that has sparked this, and it's been a huge driving force behind this. Thanks, Shannon, a lot for all the work that she's done. I've been asked to do this in about 15 minutes, and I think the shortest I've ever done is like an hour of explaining this project because it's very big and complex and everything. So yeah, we'll see what we can do.
All right, so we're talking about the old Ben High. So some of you, who went to school there? Okay, I know there's some people here. So it's about 100,000 square feet of building, that's a lot of building. I don't know when this photo's from, but there's some gems out there. It was a high school, it was the town's public high school from 1914 to 1967. Then when Mount Anthony Union High School was built, it became the middle school, and then was closed down in 2004 when the new middle school was built, to really expand the need of students. And unfortunately, the building has sat vacant since 2004. So just a little bit on the reason that it's sat vacant and why we're here together right now with Zach. One of the things that's so challenging about this building is that there are a lot of spaces within it that really aren't suitable for housing development. There have been a few different proposals that got very close, but then they fell through. And I think we're at the point now where we feel like this is the one, this is the time. We have a great team and a great partner in Zach and Hale Resources, and he and his father were the property managers of the building for 10 years, so they know the building really well. And some of the other members of the team, the town of Bennington, Dan Monks, the assistant town manager and director of planning, has been extremely involved from the very beginning. Hale Resources, Zach and John Hale. Nickerson Development, Liz Nickerson's focus is on the low-income tax credits, and she's an expert in that field. And Brian Knight is an expert in historic preservation, particularly historic preservation tax credits, which are an important piece of funding this kind of project. Another potential collaborator is NeighborWorks of Western Vermont. They may become, who's familiar with the structure of the Putnam project? It's very complex, and if you understand that, a little bit of that, you know that the Bennington County Industrial Corporation is actually the owner of the Putnam project, and in a similar way, NeighborWorks may become the owner of this building as a way to help with the funding streams, particularly around the tax credits. So we'll go to the next one. So these are just some more photos of the building in its current condition. You can see the older structure with the grand columns, and then the newer addition over here to the side. I think that one addition was built in the 50s and then added onto in the 70s, but according to historic preservation, it's all a historic building because it's all of the entire structure is over 50 years old, and it actually is on the National Register of Historic Places. The next one, so Pleasant Street, one of the slides we saw earlier from Colonel Baker was the heat map of crime statistics from the police department, and anyone living in Bennington knows that Pleasant Street is a hot spot. So the back side of the building, you know, really when you look at this building and you think about the density around the building, what we're really dealing with is urban blight. So I moved to this area from Chicago 20 years ago, and this is the kind of thing you'd see in Chicago. So I think that that's really what we're dealing with, and it's not a surprise that the surrounding area has the same sort of problems that you would find in an urban area with a massive vacant building. So some of the other more positive things happening on Pleasant Street, there has been quite a bit of investment. So the Hales actually own the building right next door to Ben High, and they're working on redeveloping some other properties on the street as well. If you want to go to the next one.
So one of the spots on that map we saw earlier, I assume is this 0.2 miles right here, which is 117 units on it. And this is Pleasant Street, and it's really like older houses that were divided up and very inefficiently, and they're at the end of their useful life. And so there's a big density right here. To put this into perspective, here is School Street. It's twice as long. It's got 146 units, but 50 of them are literally right next to this 0.2 miles. There's another 20 units also that's on Park Street. I live on Maple Street, which is right here, and that's 0.2 miles. It has 33 units. So there's a lot of housing right here on Pleasant Street, and I think it just kind of goes to the point that this area needs some investment right now because it hasn't had it in a long time, and people are living in some pretty poor environments.
One of the ironies about Pleasant Street is if you walk up and down it, the houses are beautiful. So this was really kind of where all the industrialists of Bennington live. You know, Norton Potters had a beautiful house there and others, and so these were single-family homes. And what happened over time is that, you know, most people can't live in all that space, and they became broken up into a lot of individual units that are now very dilapidated, but beautiful. At least on the outside. So the Hales, now thinking about my role for the town and how is the town involved in this? Well, the community development director, one of the reasons that position was created within the town was to help shepherd the federal and state grants that come through the municipality, such as community development block grants. So that's a really important piece of funding that helps develop housing. It's particularly affordable housing. It's coming from housing and urban development. the focus is supposed to be on low and moderate income communities, which is Bennington. So one of the things that's happened in the last couple of years, which is a huge, really sea change when we think about this funding, is that the state has started to award community development block grants to private developers. And the Hales were, again, Bennington leading the way. They were the first private developer in the state to receive this funding for 219 Pleasant Street here on the left. And anyone who's been inside of that building, it's just an incredible transformation of how they really have created some beautiful units that are affordable right on Pleasant Street. And then across the street, it's 300 Pleasant Street, which also received CDBG grant funding, and that is a partnership with Shires Housing, and it's for transitional family housing, working with the Bennington County Coalition for the Homeless. So some of the benefits to the neighborhood that really investing in this project and in the surrounding area is to have increased development in an area that's really blighted, to improve safety and security, right? Because we all know that when there's a vacant building, that just invites trouble, right? And invites crime. Greater access to housing, amenities, and services. So really focusing in that model that the Homeless Coalition is now doing with their housing development on having services and providers connected to that housing. That's really key. And I think that's something people have been talking about a lot today. Increase social and cultural diversity in the neighborhood. Right now, a lot of Pleasant Street in particular, it's really concentrated poverty and low income, and having a mix of socioeconomic groups living there and living together in the same neighborhood is really important. So enhanced community engagement, preservation and revitalization of the historic structure, and community pride in that neighborhood. Oh, one more. So another partner through our Bennington office of the Vermont Department of Health is Megan Harrington and Rory Price are leading a health impact assessment. And I believe this is the first one.
Our office has done.
It's the first one your office has done, so it's the first one in Bennington, right?
Yeah.
Leading the way again. So this health impact assessment is particularly focused on the redevelopment of Ben High. So Megan could probably tell you a lot more about it, but it's essentially looking at what is the project trying to do, what is the current need all around the area as far as health, and they're really focusing in and doing some work that we as the town and Hale Resources, it's not as much our area of expertise, and it's also giving this some important qualitative data, like really doing focus groups with, for example, seniors who could be using this space and who live nearby, teens, and also tenants who live on Pleasant Street.
Thanks, Shannon. So this is our design team, and we're going to go through the drawings and kind of show you what the building is going to become. And a lot of these consultants and the architect were already working with the town too when we came in, and actually Goldstone's been working on this building for 20 years, and so they're finally getting to see this project through, which is really cool. So this is the footprint of the building. It's about 45,000 square feet. Again, it was built in a lot of different eras, 1913 section, 1939, 1958, and then in 1975 too, there was another addition. This one is not historically significant, but still has to maintain its historical integrity as we work through getting historic tax credits. So this is each floor of the space right here. So this is the only part that has actually a basement. The rest of it is a slab. And then this is the first floor and the second floor. Just to kind of give you a lay of the land as we get further into each one of these spaces. It is going to be separated into two condos. So this is the second floor. This is going to be low-income housing tax credit condo, and then we're calling the rest of the building the non-low-income housing tax credit condo, because we're looking to utilize new market tax credits, and you can't stack the two. And really these, this is all going to be the community space here, and then we'd have what we're calling market rate units here and here, and then the childcare facility would be underneath this. We have a legal team that we're working with, because there's a lot of rules and regulations that go with all the funding that we're getting, and it is challenging to tie them all together. So I'm working with a team that is some of the best. Actually, I think both of these entities, Conrad's Inc. and DRM, Craig specifically worked on the Putnam project. And so here is the LIHTC structure. We're not going to get too far into this stuff, but I kind of wanted to just show this is like the new market tax credit structure, and so this is kind of just shows you a lot of the complexity. Basically, the banks are here, and we're here, and we're here, and we're here, and Angleworks is here, and Bennington's here, and here. So it's pretty big.
Actually, so Craig, who's the attorney that Zach just mentioned, he said this is actually more complex than the Putnam project because of the low income tax credit piece. So hats off to Zach for really figuring this out.
There's a lot of people figuring this out. So this is just a little bit closer view of the low-income housing tax credit units. Again, second floor in the newer part of the building. This would be units here and here, and then some laundry and storage here. And we're hoping for a mixture. One of the challenging parts of this is they're so deep that it's really hard to utilize this space again. And so, well, we wish we could have a lot of 2 bedrooms, but it's ending up being mostly 1 bedrooms just because of the layout. You have to have that window that is against the wall. Well, you have to have ventilation. We are trying to see if we can put some bedrooms in the middle of the room here, using skylights as the ventilation, and then we have a sprinkler system. So far, it's legal to do this, but we have funders who are questioning it. Just having a window is nice. So. But I think it's important to have a space for kids to live in a newly developed space too. And so that's kind of one of the reasons that I am pushing for it, is because 1 bedrooms don't really give a lot of opportunity for kids to live in a new space like this. Oops. So this is some of the pictures. There's that historic building that we showed in another slide looking out. This is right all those broken windows. It's right across the street from there's 10 units in this. There's another 12 unit right next to it. So there's a lot of housing just right across the street from this. And this is one of the renderings that we have for this space particularly. And you can see we have to keep stuff off the ceilings. There's going to be a little indent here to show we need to show that this is new construction, because historic preservation wants you to walk in and feel the entire space.
All right, so now this is sort of how the town has gotten involved and stepped in. So one of the real gems of this building is this large yellow space that you see. It's this Art Deco gymnasium that some of you may have played basketball in or watched some games, and it's still in good condition. And in fact, it has a new floor now. So one of the ways that I first started to get involved is that there's a real need for more indoor recreation in Bennington, and so the owner of the building reached out to me and said, "Hey, do you guys want a gym?" And so I really hadn't been in the building. I started to look at the building and think about and talk with other members of the staff and look at our programming, particularly our programming around recreation. So the way that the town does that now is we partner with the YMCA. So the closest Y to us is across the border in Berkshires. So we now have a Bennington branch of the Berkshire Family YMCA. It's run by all amazing Bennington staff. And they've really expanded the programs that are offered to the community for all ages, but they don't have a lot of space to work in. So that was the first thing that I started thinking about, and this really all happened right as COVID was hitting. So one of the proof of concepts of using some of these spaces for town recreation was that we received some COVID relief funding to just do some kind of minimal improvements to the space to be able to use it, the auditorium in particular. And what we found was that not only was it a great space for kids, you know, especially for, you know, summer camp, like on a rainy day, they had a big rec area, but all these seniors started reaching out and saying, hey, can we come in there and play pickleball? Can we do a walking club? Can we do an exercise class? So it really started to evolve in that direction. And our vision for using the space is that the town would become the kind of an anchor tenant for the Hales for these spaces. The orange area that you see there would become would be a new home for the Bennington Senior Center to allow them to expand and be all on the same level right across the hall from. The pink area would become the Meals on Wheels kitchen and offices, and then the auditorium would become the dining area for Meals on Wheels, and then after their cafe is closed at around 1 or 2, could be additional space that's used for community programs. And then the Y would manage all of the yellow spaces for some of the work that they're already doing to have exercise classes, after-school programming, you know, basketball, obviously, as well as an expanded fitness center. So the only other ones that I haven't mentioned are were the old shop rooms, the purple and lavender area. The community partners that we're working with now on those spaces are UVM Extension that runs probably everybody's heard of 4-H, and the Council on Aging. That's really the kind of parent organization of Meals on Wheels and does a lot of work with seniors. So pretty quickly we realized that, you know what, we can use all this space. And if it wasn't for ARPA funds, we wouldn't have, you know, really considered it, but we do have this opportunity now to use some of the ARPA money that the town has to begin the renovations, and then working with the Hales are looking at all the other funding streams to really make the whole thing happen. So there's a lot more we could talk about, but that's how we're looking at using that community space.
There's just a couple pictures
Oh yeah, we can show. So these are current conditions. So you can see some spaces look better than others, but the auditorium up on the upper left there, even though it's looking a little shabby, it still has been a space that people want to use. I mean, right now, we aren't opening it to the public, but people call me every week saying, hey, can I get in the auditorium and do, you know, this meeting or that meeting? So imagine it really completely renovated with new flooring, with some additional windows, etc. It really is going to be a great space. The gym below that, you can see the new floor. It also needs some love, but you know, it's solid. It's really ready to use, and I think kids in particular go right in there and play basketball if they get the chance. And then on the right hand above, that's what was a classroom outside of the auditorium. The Y was using for exercise programming, and then below it, we haven't used this space yet, but these were the old home ec classrooms that would also be turned into a multi-purpose room run by the Y.
So now we're going to look at these are the market rate spaces, it's market rate units, or I like to call them better unrestricted units, because they're really, that's one of the challenges with developing in Vermont is there's a lot of resources to provide funding or provide housing for people who have needs, but not to those who are going to provide services to those people. And so this is an opportunity to do that with 22 units after 7 years, because we have funding that requires some of them to be restricted for a certain amount of time. But one of the cool things that probably people who are following this project, first time ever seeing this is a 60-spot childcare facility that we are planning to do in the basement of the older section of the building. And then this was going to maybe be some childcare, but I think we're going to just make this a lounge and have it just be some common space for residents of the entire building. I think you wanted to speak to the childcare just a little bit.
Oh, sure. So we just, a couple weeks ago, Zach and I, along with Goldstone Architecture, went down to the Pittsfield Y. And this, on the left, the photo with the colorful carpet is one of their childcare rooms. And you can see that it's very similar. If you look above, that's the space at Ben High. So it is a basement area, but in the city we would call it a garden apartment. Because it still has a lot of light, a new coat of paint and some colorful stuff, and it could be a great space, especially for a childcare center. So that's the vision, and it was really inspiring to go to the Pittsfield Y because their building is from 1909, and they just did a whole renovation there, and there's just so many similarities of how they made it happen and seeing it completed. It was really inspiring.
And I don't know if I mentioned that, the Y would also be running the childcare facility too, so they're already doing the programming there, and they helped us design this for their programming and everything. So, and then this is the lounge, and then you can see chalkboards and stuff in the older section of the building here. This is the older section. And so one of the challenges that we are facing right now is just kind of in this moment, because we face many of them, but one of the ones right now that we're working on is this is Bennington, and all of the red represents flood zone. So Bennington is it's a valley with rivers running through it. It's in a flood zone, a lot of it. And this is the site here. And so this is the building, and all of the blue on this one is a FEMA map, and this is the building relative to the flood zone. This is the building. This is the childcare facility, the only basement relative to the flood zone. So you're not allowed to build in a flood zone, but I think we got some arguments to be made that we're not technically. So that's where we're at right now. The childcare facility, and that's the current challenge. This is just some pictures of this is the older section of the building. So Historic Preservation is going to want us to keep the chalkboards on the wall. There's glass above this wall right here because they don't want us to. They want the whole space to be able to be felt and everything. So, and these are going to be the same windows that are there today and have been for 100 years. So those are some of the things with historic preservation that we get to look forward to.
All right, so I know this is a lot of information for you guys, so we'll just run through it really quickly. But so much has already been done, and I have to really hand it to Zach that this is a huge undertaking, and although the town is taking some risk, we're using ARPA money. It's not that big of a risk. Whereas the Hales, they're really putting everything on the line here. So I just think we owe them a lot. So right now, good news, this whole project is exempt from Act 250 because it is a priority housing project. It's listed on the National Register of Historic Places, which is great for historic tax credits. It's gone through a phase 1 environmental review, which is something that is required, and we were happy to see that things looked clear. There's already been quite a bit of asbestos remediation done in the building. It's had a market study, an appraisal, a schematic design, an energy audit. The town has committed $2 million in ARPA funding. $2 million has been reserved in the Vermont Housing and Conservation Board ARPA funding for the low-income housing. $500,000 from the Community Recovery and Revitalization Program has been awarded to the Hales for the low-income housing, and then $200 in state-designated tax credits has been awarded to the Hales. $500,000 in private capital investment has been given to the Hales for the pre-development, and downtown transportation fund grant we've applied to redevelop the parking lot, and the health impact assessment is happening with the Vermont Department of Health. So we're doing this. Okay?
This one's it is a loan. It's not actually.
Okay, it's not a
I gotta pay it back. This is our timeline, which we won't get into too much detail, but basically, I just wanted to kind of show that construction is, October 1st is what we're shooting for right now. So we're running into one small detail that might push us back a little bit with some environmental stuff, but we're still feeling really good about breaking ground this year. And because it's ARPA funding, we kind of need to, because there's some timelines on that and everything. So. And I just thought it'd be cool to show the capital stack real quick of all the different funding sources over here, and then this is the LIHTC condo, the non-LIHTC, community space, residential childcare. So grants, I have entities on here who I show committing funding. This could be the first time I see that, so I'm coming your way. Yeah, so a lot of it is tax credits too that we're looking to raise. That's a big part of it, and we're talking to Berkshire Bank about making that happen. And then, yeah, some private investments. So right now the project's around 22 million, but this doesn't have the childcare facility built into it yet because this is kind of a newer thing. So I haven't looked at a lot of those grants, but I think that there's probably some money out there for that. So, yeah, so we'll leave it at that. That's actually the end of the presentation. So I don't know if we have time for questions, but happy to answer any if people have them.
Maybe one or two. No? All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, that's very exciting for all of us today. Okay, so this is the part of the day where we're going to go into small groups based on the problem statements. And the people who read the problem statements will be the facilitators for those groups. All right, so we're going to do some reporting. And so let's start with housing and just go across. And if we could have a reporter from your group just come up and briefly kind of go over the main points of what your action steps. And let's all look at them and see if we see some similar themes across all of the topics. Some of them will be specific and some will maybe end up being collaborations. So Shannon, you want to start?
Okay. So, a lot of discussion. I'll try to keep it brief. So we sort of broke our action items into 3 categories: resources for landlords, resources for tenants, and collaborating with law enforcement. So there's a real need for education of landlords. We have an opportunity. Many of the landlords in Bennington are aging, and so, not that they shouldn't be included, but there is going to be a lot of turnover too. And so some of these units that have been, had landlords for years, that there's going to be an opportunity for including new landlords as well, and really trying to educate around and destigmatize around the idea of affordable housing and what that means. Even thinking about, the name affordable housing versus workforce housing, etc. Also really educating landlords about the social services available for tenants and having more of a network and a resource platform for all of those services. Looking at models like Pathways that's already doing that well. Also for landlords, state funding incentives for priority housing areas such as our designated downtowns. Really looking at Act 250 and trying to, if possible, amend some of the things that make it restrictive for developers and really focus on the areas where we know we want housing. Resources for tenants. There was a discussion around, I know that within social service agencies, they're talking about how to lessen the bureaucracy for folks that are accessing social services by having something like a common application around that and really including housing in that. Creating new models for perhaps co-housing or home sharing. We have a lot of we have a lot of homes in Bennington with older people living in them that have space. And so this is just thinking outside of the box a little bit around how that space could be utilized for housing. And collaborating with law enforcement, really starting by just coming to the table with regular conversations between police and landlords about deterring criminal activity and sharing best practices, such as lease agreements that have, clauses within them around criminal activity, neighborhood watch programs, video surveillance, etc.
Hi, I'm Todd. I'm going to report back on the criminal justice group. We also had a very engaged and robust conversation, which was really positive in a lot of ways. We talked through, and folks who've looked at the opportunity statement that was presented this morning, that focus group came up with 3 overarching themes, and we really, maybe not expressly, but resulted in 3 action steps that respond to those themes pretty directly. The first is looking at impaneling a local team through collaboration with human services, education, and law enforcement to look at data and analyze that data to really focus on the problem areas, the hot spots, the individuals involved. A little bit like the heat map, but as Jim was saying this morning, overlaying that with additional data from additional teams so that we figure out, as a local community, Bennington is able to provide the services where the services are needed, provide the law enforcement interaction where that is needed, and ensure that the right responses go into the right places in the right ways. So that's simple action step number 1, but actually it is a low cost, no cost opportunity there, because putting the team together and beginning that collaboration is something that can happen fairly quickly and can move forward. The next step was looking at the request or the desire to continue to have an embedded social worker with the law enforcement police department here in Bennington. And the goal there is not simply to just find a body and put somebody in and have them go to work, but to create a structure that improves the trust and transparency that surrounds that service model. So that from initial contact, from a call, there's trust and transparency built with the relationship with the folks who are responding to the call and being responded to in that call, and ensuring that there's a follow-up plan so that it's not a one and done, so that somebody doesn't feel dropped off the edge at the end of the interaction with law enforcement or with a social worker, but they're really able to connect with service providers as necessary to continue them on a path towards services and hopefully channeling them away from further law enforcement interaction. And finally, we talked quite a bit about resiliency within the workforce, which of course is something that we all focus on in all our work. But the model that we really discussed was peer-to-peer support as a low-level intervention to build resiliency within a workforce. And frankly, it's a low-cost model that destigmatizes the need for mental health support. And it's something that we have found the Department of Corrections at the Agency of Human Services has had a lot of success with, and is a model that can be provided and trained to the community, so not just for law enforcement, but can really become a model of community-based mental health, or included within a model of community-based mental health, so that folks are able to engage with the mental health support and care that they need. They find value within their work, and they're able to show up at work, provide the empathy that they need in these incredibly difficult jobs without necessarily dealing with their own trauma within the same moment, which of course is going to impact their ability to provide care. That's another potentially low cost, but that's a real opportunity for community information sharing, and again, creating a culture within this community that supports mental health. Those are ours. I just want you to applaud twice. So, the outcome, we're supposed to also report on outcomes to measure how we're doing. I think the 2 easiest ones are, one, that the team gets impaneled, which is a technical term in this case, and that the data starts flowing so that there's an ability to really focus on the key areas. And then the second would be setting up a peer support training community-wide, or a series of trainings within the next year that really helps start flowing that model forward. Thanks.
More applause, more applause.
I do think in panels a common theme, that was something we talked about in our treatment focus group. My name's Alex, I'm with UCS. And so, having interagency collaboration, information sharing for organizations on the ground, that's the one thing that we talk about often. Going back, and I think that also follows suit with when we're talking about HIPAA and privacy laws and under SUD, 42 CFR Part 2. There's a way that we can also do some sort of community release model to allow providers to talk to each other around, because a lot of what we see is there's a lot of cross-reference between organizations. One family member might be connected to 5 resources, whether it's UCS, Savita, Turning Point, so come in with some sort of community release where we're able to, again, share information. I had that opportunity to choose which one, because we had a lot here, so we can just try to decide which one I want to pick. And I think, when we talk about treatments, I think oftentimes we're on this OUD, opioid use disorder, we often forget about other substances, right? AUD is kind of this secret epidemic, so to speak. So making sure we're encompassing all substances, not just opioid use disorder. And for an outcome, I think we decided looking at, again, reducing whether it's substance use or overdose fatalities, or not fatalities too. That's it.
All right, Kate and I are education and prevention, and we are close to 3. We have 4. Our first was great because we had a group with a diverse group of community stakeholders, and they actually had an ask, which was something we thought we could actually start immediately, which is to deliver professional learning about the school system to community partners, just the nuts and bolts, so that we're sharing the same language. So we thought that was a good entry point.
So our team also looked at the need for increased case management for families to help them make sure that they're accessing and removing barriers to accessing the supports that are already available in our community. So looking at how do we partner with our community partners in flexible settings, knowing that the school is not always a comfortable place for all families to come and visit to access those supports. So identifying how do we bring more case management staff and mental health supports through that case management process to families. The next action step is looking at mental health supports for staff and starting with a survey to ask staff what is it they need and what would they like to see. Because we know that when our staff aren't being cared for, they only can care for, they aren't their best selves in front of children. So how do we keep the high qualified staff that we have by caring for them? So looking at an outreach model to help that mental health support for staff.
And our final action step was really to bring students' voice into this process and to hear what they need and how can we help them create safe spaces and what does that safe space look like for them. And so creating some kind of mechanism to have those conversations with the children that we serve. And to measure, we have some internal social emotional tools that we use that could help see how we're doing.
So I was a part of the recovery and lived experience group. We had a pretty comprehensive group. I'm just going to set this down. There's a lot of common themes I think that we can all agree that we've been seeing throughout. One of them, to kind of tell the tales about this, is the compassion fatigue and caregiver burnout. I think that's something we're all experiencing in this community. We're constantly giving. And there's also a stigma around when you do need to take a break, what that looks like for you. So ways we're going to try to mitigate that. Matt mentioned he does a listserv or like an email chain where you can network for needs and wants, not only for our clients and our community members, but for yourself. One benefit is that our community is already extremely giving. We have a lot of wonderful people who group people together to give, and it's Lori who made that point where, when you're saying, hey, Lori Vatican needs, a lot of people are like, whatever Lori needs, myself included. So I think that that's something that's really important. The other common theme that I have seen too is around education and training. We talked specifically about recovery and addiction and how there's stigmas around that, but if we could work together to kind of educate and train people, stakeholders, mentors, teachers, caregivers, service providers around even the physiology around addiction and things like that, and utilize our unused resources. So I think today was a testament to how many resources we really do have, regardless of just being in the southern part of the state. I think that that's really, really important. We do have a prevention coordinator embedded at the middle school, but I think around education, not only just for us to understand addiction and recovery, but to embed more prevention work in our school systems, starting as little as, second, third, fourth grade, fifth grade, and then continuing that through the high school is really important because I think that helps also destigmatize the addiction. And then really informing our education and community around trauma-informed care. So that is something I know that SVSU has done. We are all working very diligently with Dave Melnick, who does a lot around developmental trauma. So I think that that's a real big piece of this. And then our last action plan, which I think is really a huge and very easy, no cost, low cost action plan is we often hear, Jonathan mentioned, a lot of people don't even talk about because of certain things you've heard, or when you go out to a bad restaurant, you often hear people talk about how it wasn't very good. We're all less likely to share positive things. So I think if we could get, paired up with, the Banner, the Manchester Journal, or even other newspapers throughout the state, along with social media, and using our platforms too, so our SVSU newsletter, Bennington Water maybe, I don't know, but where we would actually share positive recovery stories instead of negative things around addiction. So we have people in this room right now who have struggled with their own addiction, and now look at them, whereas I think there's a lot of stigma around people who have struggled with addiction, and you're always an addict, but you can be in recovery, and I think that that's really important for people to see. Also around kids who experienced that, as people who might have a parent of an addict, or a child of an addict, or a parent who's addicted, breaking down that stigma. We talked a lot about when Jim shared the gardeners, what was that? I can't, with a garden thing, where you plant seeds. I think that's where we talk a lot about trust, and I think right now, there's been a breakdown of that in our community. I think there's a breakdown of that in our interagencies as well, which is unfortunate, but it's there. And I think a lot of that has to do with what we talked about earlier with compassion fatigue and things like that. But I do think once we break down that stigma, it allows us to create trust and allows for vulnerability for people to share. We did talk about how when people can share their own stories, it kind of takes that, like, oh, I'm not just Melissa Cleary, the team leader for, the SVSU, but I'm also a mom, I'm also a child of an addict, and people can kind of see that as a human-to-human interaction. It really does break that down. One of the things we did talk about as an action step with this is meeting people where they're at in their community. So, maybe it is going down to Pleasant Street with a school bus filled with popsicles. Maybe it's a kickball game at Willow Park where people can just come, where it's very non-threatening, where you're just out there and, we're not in our uniforms or our suits and our dresses, and we're out there in our sneakers and some shorts, and kids can see that and parents can see that. And, doing the stomping out of stigma and pop-ups of ice cream socials and things like that. Don't tell the health and wellness committee I said that, but, where we could do, some really great options where we can kind of meet people where they are in the community. Our group also had a very lively discussion, and we could not narrow it down to 3, so we have 5 actions. I blame Cheese, that N word.
Our first one was a co-location model. So what we mean by that is kind of like a one-stop shop. Think like those fancy offices, like the open area offices where all kinds of people work together. We were thinking a space, possibly where Natalie is, where different providers could come. Maybe it's once a month, but on a regular basis. So someone from UCS, someone from DCF, someone from Sunrise, you name it, to kind of pop in so that families could get oriented to those people, because we are doing a lot of referring out and then we don't really know what happens with our clients. So that was one idea. Another is a zero barrier project. So fancy name for basically providing services to anyone and everyone. So you don't need to fill out 20 forms, you don't need to show a certain card. Think like Veggie Van Go. If you show up, you get the service. One thing we talked about was some preventative healthcare stuff, so coming to do like blood pressure. If you show up and want to get your blood pressure taken, we're going to take it for you. So something like that. Another thing was a survivor guide. It was mentioned that this has been tried in our community many different times, so kind of like a list of our services and resources in the community, which I think that's been done, but it is not always constantly revisited and updated. Part of what we think would be helpful in making sure that would be updated is reconvening a group like this annually or on a regular basis. Another thing we kind of talked about was like a campaign or a tool that's system-wide for skill development to address stigmas and also educate about generational poverty. We talked about how Vermont, especially Bennington, is very much a pick yourselves up by your bootstraps community. We don't always acknowledge the generational components and kind of why people might be in the situations that we are. So that information and education might be helpful to break down some of those barriers. And then housing for unaccompanied youth. Specifically, an example shared was the LGBTQ youth that might be kicked out by their families and don't have anywhere to go. Because they're not 18, they can't necessarily access the shelters or other housing programs like the hotel vouchers, so something along those lines. And then a final plug was, in Bennington we have 100% need, and we share too many resources with other counties. So we'd like our own resources.
Okay, so just a couple of things that I've noted listening. Anyway, thank you. I mean, this is excellent, right? Really, really, I mean, amazing work from all the groups. So just a couple, I had 7 things, 7 themes that we're kind of running through all of these, so I just thought I would highlight them. It's just from my perspective, it's not all of us, and so we'll talk more about next steps and where we're going to go from here. So here were a couple of them. The first one was regular ways of talking to each other, the collaboration issue, getting to know people in different agencies that could pop in, the clients where they're sharing, the nuts and bolts of information. So is there a regular way, monthly, that the people who really need to share information can do that, and that you want to go to the meeting? It's not just another meeting that you're required to go to, it's actually a meeting that matters, that you really feel like is going to make a difference. Okay, the second one was data collection and analysis, that seems like a really important thing for all groups to share across the different problem statements. The whole issue of destigmatizing, and then what does that look like, which is a hard topic, right? And that we need to hear the student voices about that, we need to hear clients' voices, we know we need to understand what trauma-informed care is across the board with all of us. We need to hear those sharing positive recovery stories. Okay, so that's all around the destigmatizing piece. The next one was the partnering among everybody for the whole spectrum, starting from prevention to treatment to recovery to housing to job economic development, where you get a job. And so how does that whole spectrum happen when everybody's kind of in their own lane doing one piece of it? And how do we get zero barriers from entering every piece of that spectrum so that you know you can enter it at any point and not go through a huge bureaucracy. And then along with that, as someone just suggested, a guide that is updated that really tells you the whole spectrum and how you do it in this community. Next is peer-to-peer support, the caregivers burnout. How do we really support each other? Is that across within, like within the police department, within mental health caregivers, but also maybe across? There's a real peer-to-peer support network that we set up in Bennington. And then two more. One is the very specific, the embedded mental health worker with the police department. That seems to have come up several times, and I hope that that could happen soon. And how does that happen, and is there funding for it? And then the last one is how do we educate our community? And maybe the education is not just come to a class, but it's social occasions. It's like, let's come and share a meal together, let's deliver popsicles, let's have a kickball event, and while we're there, we educate ourselves. Okay?
Before I forget, because I did forget earlier today, August, raise your hand back there. So, a while ago, Corey Parent used to be a state senator from up in Franklin County. He teaches at UVM part-time. He does consulting work. And he reached out and asked if I could use an intern in my consulting practice. And, I'm terrible at Excel spreadsheets. If you notice my emails back to you, I talk in code. My wife is constantly critiquing my texts I send people, including my grandkids, correcting my grammar. I tell her I'm not writing a novel, I'm sending a text. I am challenged when it comes to that, right? And August has come on as an intern for me, and this is the project he started on. And he's done an unbelievable job, so give him another round of applause. And now that I pumped up his ego a little bit, he's got another assignment I just gave him. What's going to happen is he's taking photographs of the report out, okay? He's going to generate a report. We'll put together an Excel spreadsheet of emails, and we'll get this information back to all of you, okay? And that'll be done hopefully in the next couple of weeks, all right? Let me just make a couple observations from just, I'm struck by how groups went off into different corners. It happens every time though. I think, Susan, would you say in your work that it happens often, that themes start coming out? And because there's a lot of folks that are thinking the same way in the community. And so, I see a lot of opportunity here for stuff that's going to take some work. Some of it's going to take more work than others. The fact of the matter is that since there's leading state officials here, conversations like an embedded clinician inside the police department is a no-brainer, right? I'm not spending Deputy Secretary Delos' money for him, but what I'm saying is it's a no-brainer, Deputy Secretary. It's a no-brainer, sir. On a serious note, there's things here that can make a difference in a hurry. And some of it's doable. Another observation for me is this self-care piece, okay, across the board. And I'm going to get the date in a minute. This self-care thing, Dan and I saw this countless times when we were in groups meeting. We could see it in people's faces. At least one of our meetings got emotional. I'm talking about the focus groups. And this stuff is real. This is a traumatized community. Let's just call it for what it is. It goes back to what I said earlier. People tend to be in denial sometimes, and then they stick to their story, and no one calls them out. It isn't a stigma to say that we're traumatized. 2 homicides within a year, 22 shootings. It's just not the police department that's faced this. And this stuff, after a while, takes a toll. And so I don't think there is a huge body of work out there, and Lauren, I think you'll agree with me. In another life, I work with the International Association of Chiefs of Police on officer safety and wellness. There's a huge body of work out there. And it's just not, having a peer support team isn't just in corrections, as the Deputy Secretary talked about. And having peer supporters in the community is huge. And I don't think it's going to take that much work to do it. So I challenge you to as I see my friend Bill Elwell shaking his head, lean on people like Billy Elwell. And there's a huge body of work. And I don't care what you do for work, and you're in this room, okay, I'm going to call you out. Public defenders, right? The toll that it takes, what you see for caseloads, what recovery coaches see for caseloads, DCF, state's attorney, the list can go on. So I challenge you to be thinking about this as an action item walking out of here and keep that conversation going. You can't take care of the community if you're not in a space where you're healthy. And I've heard many stories in the last 3 months since I've been doing this work. Some of it was in the medical field, some of it's been in the law enforcement field, it's been otherwhere. This empathy fatigue thing is real. You see same clients over and over again. It's like, okay, enough of this guy. I lived that in part of my life. And so I challenge you to be thinking about that theme that just came up, right? And so I don't want to take much more time. I think I've never been directly involved in anything where we leave early, but I think we're going to be able to do that today. Let me make one more point.
Jim.
Not yet? Yes.
These are awesome, these are great. There's a lot of linkages, right, as Susan pointed out. What next? And what are we measuring? Or is that what we're
coming to that.
All right, because I didn't want you to let everyone go, because people are like,
I know when I send you my next invoice, Commissioner,
I want to make sure I got all my money.
Yeah, the last check from the state pops not this. Let me just talk about measurement first, right? I mean, I think before we start talking about what we're going to measure, you're going to have to get the data straight. Lindsay, can I pick on you for 1 minute? We had a conversation at lunchtime, right? And I'm going to use this as an example of data. I was sitting with my friends from the network, and this goes back to the work that we did together when we were in Rome. And I asked you this question, Lindsay. Bennington's 52% of their violent calls for service are domestic violence. And you're dealing with victims at the other end. And I asked you this question. Could you name a group of individuals who had more than one victim in domestic violence? And you said you could name 3 right off the top of your head. Am I right? Mm-hmm. So this goes to the point about getting very deliberate about data and drilling down on data. And this is where I know we can get into conversations about, that commissioner of corrections and, supervision, and I know we can get into that whole conversation, I get it. But if there's 3 guys, and I'm assuming I probably should be assuming this. There's 3 individuals, thank you, Lindsay, for catching me. There's 3 individuals in this community that had multiple victims. And if they got a little bit extra loving in the court system, and they didn't have those victims, those calls would immediately go down. That's where the data is going to come from, Commissioner. And I think to say if we're going to measure it or not is collecting the data, right? That's the next step in order to get to the measurement. Now, the second part of your question, Commissioner, I think in a few minutes we're going to announce that next step. The next step, first of all, is capturing this information, getting it back to you, and then I'm going to let Laura come up with Chief Doucette in a minute and talk about what the next steps are, because they do have a plan moving forward. So before we do that, it's been a long day. Questions, comments, challenges about the work that was done today. Thank you for this hard work. It's been a lot of hard work today. And I don't like sitting in those breakout rooms, so notice I wasn't sitting in a breakout. No. It's hard work to be there having that discussion. And if you do take up the challenge of reading Tom Matt's book, Bleeding Out, you'll see in there, he makes a statement. If you're doing community work, and you're working cross-section doing community work, and you're not at one meeting where a shouting match breaks out, you're not making progress. Think about that for a minute. There's going to be disagreements, and there's going to be different ideas, but the ability to build that trust, and as I walked around, I heard at least 2 groups having a robust conversation about trust, right? If you don't have the trust, you can't sustain the shouting match at the meeting about moving forward, if you're following my reasoning, right? So questions, comments, and challenges before I turn the microphone over to Chief Doucette and Lorna Madden from UCS. Yes, Lindsay.
I'll just make one comment. As much as I agree with you that if we could focus on perpetrators that continue to perpetrate, our numbers are going to go down. I think we also need to focus on prevention because someone else will just fill the spot.
I don't disagree.
One of the pilot programs that one of my sister agencies is a warm line for perpetrators, so, or anyone who feels like they might commit harm in relationships where they could call, get de-escalation techniques, kind of like a mental health crisis line. They can't utilize our crisis line, you know, because they're on the other end, but that is something that I think would benefit our community, and they're piloting in the Northeast Kingdom, so just put that idea out there while I have everyone sitting around.
So Lindsay, when just to be clear, because again, I don't want to get too far into bleeding out or this whole concept about focused deterrence. I don't want to get too far into this, but there are certain individuals that are involved as a result of stressors in life or whatever, but then there's people that I think you all agree with me. These are people who are dangerous that are going to harm victims, right, long term. So again, building that strategy, I agree. I mean, offering them an off-ramp from that life of aggressiveness towards a victim is absolutely something that works, I agree.
Hey, Jim?
Yes, Doctor, oops.
I got one. You talk about bleeding out. When you read this book, you're gonna see a lot about street violence. Replace those 2 words with chaos.
Yes. Thank you.
Okay? And the methodology is the same, and it becomes a little more relevant to our reality and our truth here.
Thank you, man, for saying that. I should have said that earlier. And look, somebody's asked me, what do you mean by chaos? I've had this question a couple times. You know, if you're living in one of the neighborhoods where it's on the heat map, you're going to recognize what chaos looks like. You're going to recognize what it is. And it's, again, this is not, you know, using that term, you run the risk of stigma of individuals that live there. I get that. But they want to live in safe neighborhoods too that doesn't have that. You know, my experience in Rutland was that, you know, we had one Street library where out of 15 houses, you know, 8 or 9 of them were apartment houses, and out of those 8 or 9, we had heavy domestic violence, substance abuse, and the chaos that it brought to the neighborhood. Family fights on front lawns, you know, property values going down. These are things that damage communities, but they're damaging individuals as well. So there's a bunch of questions back here. Alex?
Just a comment, you know, I'm sitting here reflecting, we're using the word trust, and, you know, trust amongst partners, but I think about the clients that we serve and the distrust they have amongst providers that they're, you know, whether it's, you know, UCS or turning courts or, you know, so how do we work with clients to help rebuild that trust with other providers, right? Because I think that's another barrier when we're talking about support and services. Well, I don't want to go here because of my past experience that happened 10 years ago. So I just think about that just from a trust perspective. I think that's important that, you know, how do we work with, you know, people.
Yeah, you know, when we did the focus groups, it came up, that conversation came up a little bit about clients not having trust in systems. And you really should be thinking about that if you're in the system, about what that looks like. And is that a barrier for people coming to ask for help or families that are in need? So I agree, Alex. It actually came up in focus groups leading up to this. Doc, I'm going to get to the second. Somebody had their hand up in the back.
Yeah, just about evaluation and measuring the outcomes of how many reports is great, but there's an indication that people are willing to shift how they're doing things or lean into how they're doing things. So will there be an effort to measure how much are we doing and how well are we doing it also, and not just the better off piece of of that cycle.
Absolutely. And I'm trying to hold back on making the big
Because
announcement.
that'll help us then shift gears if we need to.
We're not getting millions of dollars, I just want to make sure you're not building up this announcement that
Yeah, listen, and the other thing is, I know money is nice, but money doesn't solve all problems. My analogy, many of you have heard me say, is when you drop money into a situation, it's like being the first person in the neighborhood to have a swimming pool. No one waves to you, now everybody waves to you. So, I mean, it is important, but it's not the end. Doc Levine.
Yeah, three things that just came to mind in all this discussion that's been going on. The first one was your comment about the traumatic year this has been for the department and for the community with those statistics that have been put out with the board. And we can't ignore that, and that's why everyone here probably feels a little special, like here we are, this is the first community that is actually having this addressed on a very big scale with a very broad audience. But there's also sort of a like misery loves company part, and it's like the governor wanting to come out with a 10-point community violence prevention plan if Bennington was the only place in Vermont that was like in trouble. So keep that perspective in mind. Yes, things are bad and we're addressing them and we should feel good about that, but also don't feel so bad that Bennington's been the place not to go in Vermont because something bad happens there, because it's everywhere. Second part is building on Lindsay's prevention. I was really impressed with the comments about the kids who won't leave school and stay after school because they know what they're going home to or God knows what. And that's where prevention really is. After school programs, keeping kids, especially adolescents, from experimenting in ways that aren't so healthy, and giving them constructive, productive things to do, having mothers visited with their newborns, if they're a vulnerable families unit, and the whole issue of adverse childhood experiences, ACEs, the need to build resilience and the need to really understand that so much of what we see in crime is generational in its birth, if you will. And it all has to do with those heat maps and the public health data, which probably in this case is much more poverty-driven and socioeconomic class-driven than it is racial or anything else. But the fact is, it's been there a long time, and we don't just fix it with a new program that we develop. It really has to go back to those sort of social determinants that have us where we are, just because we were born at the wrong zip code. And then the third thing had to do with the fact that every sector has been affected, and there's lack of empathy, there's burnout, there's all of that stuff, the baggage. But the thing I've been impressed today, now I know this is selection bias in my world, but the reality is everybody in this room talked not just about months and days and weeks, they talked about years or decades of doing what they're doing. I think everybody in the room should give themselves a hand of applause because they are invested for the long term in this. And we care about their mental health and their resilience, and they probably still need to work on that to an even greater degree in the environment we're in. But the reality is they're in it. And they haven't had the great resignation you hear about all across society today. So. Commissioner Morris and I, once in a while, the doctor liked to kid with you, like if you never got his autograph after the pandemic, he'll give autographs out.
Yeah, they're $10 each, so if you can see me, they're $10 each.
The famous face on TV every day. I was in AHS at the time, so we got to torture the doctor on a regular basis. Star status out there. Who else had their hand up? Yes, sir, in the back.
Chad Savita.
Chad.
I just wanted to say today, I feel like, to reflect back on what happened today, it's this amazing opportunity for this village approach to have. And go figure, the village showed up, right? Everybody's here for the right reasons, and I think that the way, in my opinion, that we can collaborate and combat this further is starting to treat this not just as a community thing, but this is our family. This is affecting all of us in some form or another. And the more we put boots to the ground and we start to understand each other's perspective, understand where we're coming from, and try to fill those blanks, because if we're doing something wrong, we need to have somebody else call us out on it. If you're seeing it a different way, how we can approach this, we need somebody to pull us up, and that's what this is for. And we need more of this. We need to be able to have these open dialogue conversations so we can continue helping, because it's not just about us. We can all develop biases over time, right? We can all have those opinions. With one patient we see all the time. But if you were to hand it off to somebody else that might be able to do it, you can train them to say, here, let's look at this a little differently. How can you teach me how to look at this a little differently? And that's what this is about to me.
Thank you for those comments. That's, I think it's pretty powerful. I mean, thank you for that. Eitan, did you have your hand up?
Yeah. In 2019, the Attorney General decided to institute a series of fora that move around the state towards a hate-free Vermont. They have resumed now with the participation of the U.S. Attorney's Office as well. We just did one in St. Albans last week. What I have learned is this room is wonderful. It is also largely providers. If you do not have the gruff voices, the hurt voices, the voices that are going to mess it up and scream at you and go, I don't give a damn about your mental health. If you don't have those voices, you're missing an entire part of the picture. And I would go so far as to say that if you're interested in inclusion, a hallmark of inclusion is the messiness. So I hope, my hope, is that those go up on the wall again, and we get people in here who are going to throw darts at all of it. And then we'll get a picture of what really needs to happen.
Thank you for that. Representative Morris.
Just Mary. Just wanted to thank you and the team that put this together. I do understand we do need more other voices, but today was a great start, and I hope we're going for the long haul to the future. And you are the gift that keeps giving, because in your last venue, I saw you almost daily in Montpelier, so I'm glad you're back home.
I don't know if I'm the gift that keeps giving. Some people, I'm big enough to know that some people are probably sick of seeing my face, but I always appreciate your comments, Morris, thank you. Okay. Are you ready? Yeah. Okay. Chief, you ready?
Ready.
Let's roll. Here comes the $6.5 billion.
Everybody gets a free book.
Ready?
Yeah, sure.
Hey, so I'm not really sure I need this. So before we get started, I just want to touch on a couple things really quickly that no one mentioned, that today's the first day of spring, so I want to bring that up. It's currently 51 degrees outside, so and the weather forecast says that we're going to lose 3 to 4 inches of snow a day from now until Friday. So that's pretty fantastic. Couple things really quickly. I don't like to talk about my personal life, but I will tell you that there is one person in this room that has made my life very easy for the last 2 months while I've been dealing with some personal issues. And when I met with Colonel Baker, he said, Chief, no heavy lift for Cam Brandy on this, no heavy lift. And Cam has been my guy for the last couple of months while I've been out of work dealing with some things. And he made a lot of things happen, and I would like to just give him You know, in our world, lieutenant's always referred to as number 2. And if, for those of you that have kids, number 2 is something different, but Cam is my number 1, and that is for sure. You know, one of the other things that I just want to touch base on before we do our thing is you know, we started talking about ice cream and popsicles and things like that. Well, let me give you a little caution on that. So we've had our popsicle trailer now for about 4 years, and we got that thing going, and it was absolutely amazing. And we handed out lots of popsicles, and lots of Wilcox ice cream. And then somebody said, "You are promoting oral tooth decay. You are promoting childhood obesity." So I just caution you, if you decide to go out and hand out popsicles, see our friends at Battenkill Valley up in Arlington. They will give you all of the toothbrushes and toothpaste that you need so you can offset what you're doing. For sure. Because believe you me, it was a hot topic. And we still have our popsicle trailer, and we have about 300 toothbrushes for the start of the summer season here. You know, we talked about measuring things. You know, Cam and I kind of thought that, you know, one of the ways that we can measure what's happened here today, and Anton, I loved your comments, but one of the ways we can measure things that happen here today, and I'm going to go full circle on you and tell you that people in Vermont, municipalities, other communities in Vermont will follow what's happened here today. And that is one way to measure what we've accomplished here today, without a doubt. The most important part of what's going to happen, Lorna is going to announce. And but we are super excited that everyone came together. If you look around the room, most people are still here. For the people that left, feel our pain for the people that live in the southern part of the state. We do travel to Waterbury and Montpelier. You don't have to spend the night tonight. I just want to say that I did have some fun with our friends last night at the public house, and it was fun to listen to them talk about, oh my gosh, it was such a long time. It was so long to get here. My GPS took me the wrong way, and I was so confused. And,
It usually takes us an hour to go up.
yeah, right. That's what they think, right? So that's really what I wanted to mention to you, all of you, for just a little bit of humor. Bennington is we call ourselves a border community because we border New York. We're 9 miles from Massachusetts. We're 44 miles from New Hampshire. But we're a long way from Montpelier and Waterbury, where a lot of you are from. So I just want to remind all of you of that, and we're going to drive on, Lorna.
And I also want to thank our state partners, not necessarily our local state partners, but our faraway state partners for coming down to be with us today. Even though you had to stay in the terrible dorms. Yeah, so I'm talking to Emily last night, and I said, so how's your place? How's the place that you're staying at Bennington College? Thank you very much for free. And she says, oh my God, it's like a spa. I brought flip-flops to wear in the showers. I thought I'd be in the dorm. This is the best place I've ever stayed. So they probably wouldn't have been able to come down back and forth. They had to pay for it. So thank you to Bennington College for the wonderful food. Todd and I thought it was the best boxed lunch we've ever seen. So thank you. We want a fancy lunch next time. But really, it was remarkable that Bennington College supported this entire thing from the very beginning. We did not have to pay a dime, talking about free or no cost, right? So thank you, Susan. Gosh, what a remarkable day it's been. Like, look at what we've already accomplished behind us in just a matter of a day, or even really the 2 hours that we spent together. And so thank you all for that. What I'd like to do is have the Bennington folks, or Bennington County folks, to stand up. You want to stand up, right? You're tired, just stand up. You want to stretch a little bit. So you are all allies to the community who are struggling with violence, drugs, alcohol, housing issues, mental illness, all the things that we talked about today. And today was about strengthening our current relationships and collaborations, building trust and sharing ideas. And tomorrow is about putting those ideas into action. And so what I'm inviting you all to do is your call to action, which is to join what we're calling Project Alliance. Project Alliance will ensure that action steps are coordinated, communication flows, decisions are made, data is shared, and resources are leveraged to effectively respond to our community needs and to put these things that you identified into real action for our community. We've all been in those places. We talked about it this morning, the governor talked about it this morning, where we get together and we talk about, yeah, we're gonna do this, we're gonna do this, we're gonna do this, and then we all leave and we enjoy the 51-degree weather outside, and then we say, boy, that was a great meeting. Wasn't it a great meeting? I wonder what's gonna happen next with that meeting, with that stuff. And then eventually nothing happens and we all just kind of go, huh, too bad nothing happened with that thing. Well, I'm here to say that something's gonna happen with this thing. And what I'm inviting all of you to do as people who work and live in this community and support our community is to join Project Alliance, become an active member of Project Alliance, which will include people with lived experience and who are those who are living and suffering in our community as well, to be able to put all of these things together. So we are the core team that helps, you can sit down now. So the core team that helped put this together today, as Jim said, we're going to kind of gather ourselves again, gather this information, and start putting together what's the start of a plan. And we're going to reach out to all of you, and we hope that you choose to join us for Project Alliance and to have those next steps that you're all going to create together, that we're all going to create with our community to put these things forth. And I really hope that you will join us. Chief, anything?
I just want to say that, between UCS and the hospital and all of our partners, I'd be remiss to try to stand up here and tell you everyone that's involved. We clearly are continuing to build. We have the foundation. I'll go full circle and go back to my vertical comment this morning. Now we need to build up, right? We need to build up and out and make sure that we are touching the lives of everyone, Anton, that is affected by all of the things that we face in this community today. We understand the domestic violence piece. We understand the drug piece. We all know that since COVID, we got to get together with the Sheriff's Department and the state police and our other law enforcement agencies. That's okay for cops to do, but at the same time, we got to get together with school clinicians. Right? We got to get together with UCS. We got to get together with the health department. We have to look at each other's stats and determine where we need to go in this community. And the police department needs to be part of that. UCS needs to be part of that. The hospital, huge expansions at the hospital, right? And we don't want to fill all of those new beds. We don't want to keep the ER, busy. We want to make sure that people are getting the treatment that they need, so that we can build our community back up along with this Project Alliance. And we want all of you to participate. Thanks for coming today.
Yeah, thank you.
Appreciate it.